and we've been working with others stateside, federally. We are federal partners. We appreciate everybody that helped CYTF come up with this platform and our recollection yearly to bring attention to human trafficking. Not that we're saying that you could only pay attention to human trafficking only once a year, but this is where we come together and see and look back at what happened, our path for human trafficking. Okay, so sorry, my phone's going off. Sorry. So we're going to begin. We're going to start with our headlines. And besides Jeffrey Epstein, we've had, I don't want the focus to be just on Epstein because he made national news. We have other incidents of human trafficking that occurred like back to back to back after Jeffrey Epstein got exposed in 2019. So here we are with our human trafficking headlines in the BI. The first one here, as I said, came out in Brookman Road at the Underground nightclub. How I remember the whole play, a young lady, I think she was from Venezuela, called her parents and saying she was held captive, and her parents called our federal offices to report that she was being exploited on Brookman Road 2019. So this is a picture of the nightclub, set nightclub. They made daily news of where it was and what was happening. So I've got the clips from our daily news. Our next incident that happened was, this is 2020, in a content brothel. A young lady, a Dominican national, had young ladies come in, exploited people from DR to come in to work at her guest house. And they found out that it was prostitution. They were being forced to prostitute in this guest house and nightclub. So this was recent, November 2020. Well, year ago, more or less a year ago, November about to be here, but we had that as well. So this has been going on for years. And as the article says, they found 7 undocumented immigrants that have been forced into sex work here on St. Thomas. So we're going to begin our video, our national news that actually kicked off our human trafficking conferences, workshops yearly. And this is from NBC. So we're going to play the clip from NBC.
Allegations that Jeffrey Epstein abused girls on his private island in the Caribbean, some as recently as 2018, in a sex trafficking web that went on longer and involved 4 girls.
Just one second. One second.
Jeffrey Epstein carried.
Okay.
Jeffrey Epstein abused girls on his private island in the Caribbean, some as recently as 2018, in a sex trafficking web that went on longer and involved more girls than anyone realized, according to authorities.
Jeffrey Epstein carried out an expansive scheme of human trafficking and sexual abuse of young women and underage girls right here in the Virgin Islands.
The Attorney General in the Virgin Islands filing a civil suit against Epstein's estate. accusing the financier of bringing minors as young as 12 to his secluded compound, described as the perfect hideaway for trafficking young women and underage girls.
Excuse me.
We got a close-up view of his island during a visit last summer. According to the suit, flight logs and other sources establish that up until 2019, Epstein brought underage girls to his island, using his own private planes and helicopters. While there, they were subjected to sexual servitude and forced to engage in sexual acts. Echoing stories some victims told NBC News, including Shanti Davies, who says she was raped on the island when she was 22.
And that first time was on the island, and it happened multiple times on the same trip.
This suit alleges for the first time that Epstein continued to abuse girls long after he struck what many considered a sweetheart plea deal with federal prosecutors in Florida. In 2008, he served 13 months in jail after pleading guilty to soliciting prostitution. Following his release, Epstein was free to travel where he pleased, including homes in New York, Paris, and here, his island compound. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News.
This year, back-to-school shoppers can expect higher prices.
Okay. So Dr. Makika Fred has laid out.
So
the video. Go ahead, Mika.
after we said that, we teamed up with VIAG
Right.
on with them in Georgia to see how is human trafficking playing among other Caribbean people. Well, Virgin Islands is the Virgin Island Association group in Georgia. So we decided to collaborate with them. We did 2 guest spots on their Facebook Now platform to make aware of everything. It doesn't matter where you are in this world, human trafficking can affect you.
Yes.
So
that being
Dr.
said,
V, where are we going now?
so therefore, Kamika's correct. So since we know we live in a small island, the question that the Attorney General
We can't
asked,
hear you. We can't hear you.
can you hear me?
There we go. Okay. There we go. We're good.
Yeah, Kamika correct. It can happen anywhere. But I think in the last couple of conferences we had with the Detective Hunt and the team members from education showing that some children in the Virgin Islands were being exploited and trafficked. And that surprised a lot of team members the last couple of conferences we had. But that being said, the big question is, I'm going to turn it over to Carla Perkins quickly. Tell us, why is it in a small Caribbean island, why is this such a secret? Because the question is, how does this happen in a small island? Like, why does it happen? And could you give us the cultural context in a minute?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla Perkins. Thanks for having me. I had the pleasure and honor of being a resident of the Virgin Islands for almost 4 years in the recent past. And my background is in social work. I have been a licensed clinical social worker for the past little over 20 years, and human trafficking is always something that's discussed, having worked in child welfare and in education as a social worker. And one of the terminologies that I became familiar with, particularly while working and living in the Virgin Islands, was just understanding the impact of being in a geographically isolated community. And even though there is great advantage in terms of people being close knit, people living closer together, people knowing one another, those are many great advantages. It can also contribute to some of the vulnerabilities that young people may experience as we discuss something like human trafficking, because the traffickers, as we have seen in some of the headlines Dr. Fred discussed, are not strangers, right? And so how people get involved in human trafficking, as will probably be discussed in depth later on today, is often through people that they know. As I did some research, it's believed that almost 50% of the time family members may be involved, and it doesn't always mean parents. It can be aunts, cousins, uncles, whomever that a young person may interact with. So you have the complicated relationship where when someone realizes that they are being trafficked or they don't want to engage in whatever behaviors, sexual or otherwise, who am I going to tell when I have to maybe report someone that's a close family friend, a neighbor, the stigma that's associated with being a victim of anything. And that is another reason why at times people don't come forward. Culturally, sometimes involving authorities is not the desired thing, because what happens in homes is tends to be, I'm sorry.
One second, Dr. Hall is on the line, and I know that his
Okay.
schedule is very tight. Dr. Grinnell, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Can you introduce Dr.
Good morning,
Grinnell?
Dr.
I know he
Hall.
has a
Good
quick-
morning, everyone.
Go right ahead, Greg.
Yes, no, I just wanted to take a second to welcome Dr. Hall, President Hall, to this very important workshop. Really appreciate the time, President Hall, that you take to give some remarks. It is very special and important that you are here. You've been champion for the spiritual and physical health of students and faculty and everybody at UVI. And through your leadership, I think that these issues of spiritual and physical health of our communities is becoming more and more important in the USVI. You've done a lot of work really making sure that the students can live and learn in a safe environment. And even though some of your initiatives have been controversial for some, you've been steadfast in really sort of putting those principles at the very heart of everything you do and care for our community. So I think it's a very it's a really good fit for you to present and be the sort of introduction for this human trafficking workshop today. And it's really a pleasure to have you here and help raise awareness about this scourge and overall thing that is human trafficking that is affecting us here in the Virgin Islands. So Dr. Hall, if you don't mind, go ahead.
Good morning to everyone who's assembled. I want to thank you, Greg, for those very kind words and encouraging words. I want to thank you and Dr. Victor for being the leaders of this overall effort around children and families on an ongoing basis, and certainly the focus here on human trafficking. I want to apologize to the person who was speaking, who unfortunately had to be cut off so I could come in, and my sincere apologies for that. Today is the university's State of the University program, and I do have to prepare for that and deliver that address. And so my schedule was a little tight and could only fit in this particular window. And I appreciate the adjustments that all of you have made so that I can share a few words. First of all, I bring greetings on behalf of the Board of Trustees, faculty, staff, and students. This is an issue collectively that we all embrace and support, and we are glad that you are taking time out of your day to be here. I looked briefly at the schedule, and I know that there are various commissioners who have been invited, and I at least saw one who was already here, Commissioner Gomez, and I am sure others will support this effort as well. My thoughts would be brief, but I hope they go to the core of why you are gathered. In this COVID era, where we are focused so much on the virus and our different approaches to trying to address this enormous challenge, it is very easy to forget that there are other forms of suffering that human beings are encountering, engaging, and dealing with on an ongoing basis. And we cannot lose sight of that, because COVID is critical, it is important, but the other ills, the other abuses that exist in our society in these Virgin Islands need our attention, need our research, need our collective efforts. And I am glad you are focusing on that. This issue is really compelling because one would hope that in 2021, that as a territory, as a nation, and as a world, we would have had enough deep respect for human life, for the autonomy of individuals to not have this challenge continuing to be with us. But it is with us. And women in particular are the victims of this horrendous crime. And whatever we can do as individuals, as institutions, to change it, to get in the way of it continuing to happen, is worthy of our time and our efforts. And those who engage in this horrendous enterprise are individuals that we have to somehow identify, penalize, and reform, because it is not going to go away just because we focus on those who are the survivors, or even focus on those who are potential victims. We have to get at the core of why human beings, why men in particular, would want to abuse, use, and entrap other human beings for profit and pleasure. And until we as a society come to grips with why that can exist in our midst and how we can change the mentality and perspectives of others, then we will just continue to go in circles. So from the university's perspective, if there is anything more that we can do in regards to research, in regards to pulling together the individuals in the various disciplines, from social work to psychology, to criminal justice, to assist in this effort, then know that we stand ready to respond. So I hope that the entire day will be rewarding and fulfilling. I hope that some solutions and answers can grow out of it. But if not, just the raising of awareness for all of us about the fact that human trafficking still exists and still is altering and affecting the lives of so many people is something we need to know. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share a few words with you. And as I said before, if there's any role that the university or I can play in a greater way than what we're doing, please let us know. Thank you very much and have a wonderful conference and gathering.
Thank you, Dr. Hall,
Thank you, Dr.
for your
Hall.
excellent words. Thank you. We appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
So I want to slide in there.
One
Dr.
second, Dr.
Brathwaite
Chair.
Hall was in our first conference. I want to make sure I give her kudos for being with us on our first conference. So Dr. Brathwaite Hall as well. She was there, she was by our side. So we want to give her kudos for being there at our first conference. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I will pass that on to her.
Thank you. We thank you again.
All right.
Bye. So we're moving on.
One second,
gonna
Dr.
move-
Fred.
Hmm?
Before we move on, because we have to move on, we have to let Carla Perkins finish up the importance of culture, because she's going to set the tone, and then we are going to move back to you to do what you need to do moving forward. Ms. Perkins, could you finish up your cultural context perspective? And that's really important because that question comes over and over again, small communities. And what is about small communities that allows such things to be hidden, not just human trafficking, but other things, abuse, neglect, child exploitation. It's so many other things, but could you give us that context before we move forward?
So thank you again. The last thing I'll say, as I know time is upon us, is just the vulnerabilities that contribute to individuals being trafficked are the things that allow the traffickers to create dependence. And as we saw in the first clip of the video, and as will be discussed today, what are those vulnerabilities that people have, whether it's just that living in a community where everybody's close knit, but travel can be far, not necessarily door to door, but sometimes the assumption is that, you know, islands, even though people are traveling back and forth, that no one is going to allow this in our community, but there's dependence. It could be economic, it could be the labor exploitation that was discussed, the sexual exploitation that was discussed. So as we go through today, we should have in mind, what are some of those vulnerabilities that can contribute to that dependence? Where are the places where we don't always encourage our young people to talk about what they feel and what's going on with them? Where are the places where we keep what happens in our house secret, or we're not open about the fact that abuse can occur, sexual abuse, physical abuse, things that we may know as practices are not best practices, but continue because no one can speak out against the elder in the family who may sanction that behavior, or we just don't deal with it because involving authorities mean that what privately happens in this home could be known to others in the community, and the stigma that may be that may follow revelations of certain things that are uncomfortable to talk about. But that's why today is so important, because even as I've moved to Indianapolis in Indiana, I'm in an urban area, but Indiana is composed of several rural counties, and we're having the same conversations about what about those young people in places where are they going to run to, right? Who are they going to tell? How are these things happening? So I just want to leave us with that today, that as we understand human trafficking as a major issue that is happening, whether it's known or unknown in the community, how can we intervene at these different points in how young people are socialized, how we talk about difficult topics, how we look at prevention and training so that the problem can be recognized and that there can be openness, so that if somebody's in trouble, they might tell somebody, and that person they tell knows how to get help, even if they can't solve it themselves. So thank you so much. I wish you all a wonderful day. I will be in and out because I am in the middle of a busy school day, and I look forward to learning from all of the presenters. Thank you so much.
Okay, I thank you, Ms. Carla Perkins, Human Trafficking Task Force team member. And I know Warren Mitchell is there because he will be speaking shortly, but I'm going to bounce it back to Dr. Mika Fretz. I'll keep an eye on the calendar because I know the commissioners one by one will be jumping on in, like Kimberly Gomez. I don't know if Commissioner Gomez is on the line yet, but I'll keep an eye. So I'll send it back to Mika Fretz. Mika Fretz, proceed.
So as I was saying, I'm gonna just stop. I'm gonna be annoying with this phone number, 1-888-373-7888. And that's the Federal Victim Support Number for Human Trafficking. So we're gonna talk to and meet one of our friends we met along the way, Mr. Warren Mitchell. We were so enthused to get a call that said, hey, let's partner with VIAG. They are fantastic. As I said, we were a part, CYTF was a part of 2 of their Facebook platform programs. And we just wanna give Mr. Mitchell a shout out because you're doing it for the VI, but you're doing it for everybody, women and children across the nation that come across in Atlanta. So Mr. Warren Mitchell, please go ahead on your exploits and how you met us, what went on, and what you're doing.
Greetings, everybody, and good morning. I am Warren Mitchell, licensed clinical social worker here in the Atlanta area, and also just received my license back home in the VI. So I'm excited about that, as I hope to do some work there as well. I am also here. I have a private practice here at Journey of Self-Discovery. And I'm a president of also the Virgin Islands Association of Georgia. And so while we were looking for various topics, one that we came upon that we realized was pretty important was sex trafficking, human trafficking, And so we reached out, did some research, and realized the Virgin Islands was actually actively involved in the process of supporting victims and working on trying to eliminate this horrendous crime that is being done to our people, especially to women and children, but to boys and as well. Keeping that in mind, it's not just a female. They're not females that are victims to this. So in our connection with the Children Task Force, met with Dr. Victor, Dr. Mika Fred, and we really had some great discussions and had 2 episodes. First was just educating people what is human trafficking, and that there was more to human trafficking than just sex trafficking, and that was important and distinction for us to be clear of, and also recognizing it's not just children who are minors who are victims, that adults, and I was also in my, as a therapist, met a client who was an adult, and she was trafficked by a guy that she met, and she thought it was a date, and took her from Atlanta to Florida on a trip, and to a place where she did not know, and locked her in the space. And so for months, she was being trafficked until she was able to escape. So this can happen to anybody. So don't put your guards down, thinking that is just for kids, or because you're an adult, that someone won't try to approach you in some sort of slick and seductive way. And we also had a person who was living in Atlanta, who's actually from the Virgin Islands, who was trafficked while she was here in Atlanta, and she's now out of it, escaped from it, and has started her own program and to support victims who have been trafficked, and providing education and counseling to them. We work with Dr. Gill here at Tabitha House in Atlanta, it's a program, an organization to support victims of sex trafficking as well. And she was also a guest on that same panel. The second show was focused on solutions, attempting to find solutions. And we talked about the vulnerability and why, similar to what Dr. Carla Perkins mentioned, how could people get involved in trafficking, both as the victims or the perpetrators, and how to, what is it that we can do to open our eyes and be more involved and engaged, to let people who are engage in these behavior know that this can't happen here. We have to look at culturally, what is it that we bring into the table that is supporting this type of behavior, and being mindful of things that we need to hold ourselves accountable to. This hush hush, as Dr. Perkins talked about, not wanting people in our business. So we don't want to inform the authorities, or we don't want to mention anything because we want to keep stuff. We don't want to be snitch. Is another term that some people might use, but it is important for us to, which came out of this for me as well, the value of us paying attention to this and not ignoring it just because it's not happening right in our house or in our backyard, but it is happening in our backyard, in our community and neighborhoods, and we need to pay attention. So it was good to have Dr. Victor and Dr. Fred to really educate us and let us know what was going on in the Virgin Islands, as well as in our research was able to find out that this is happening throughout the Caribbean as well. And so this is, we got to do better. So thank you. And Dr. Victor and Dr. Fred, who become lifelong friends throughout this process. So appreciate you all for the dedication and the work that you do.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, Dr. V, are you going to start announcing the commissioners?
Well, I haven't seen them back. I think some of them jumped off, so I'm waiting for them to jump back on. So you can proceed forward. When it's time, I'll have them make remarks. I know the testimony.
Good morning. Hey, Dr. Victor, it's Commissioner Gomez. I am on.
Okay, Commish, go ahead, make your remark, because I know you're very tight with the schedule.
I want to just say thank you. I'm driving, just so you know, you're not going to see me right now, but I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. V. The task force has come a long way, and this particular topic is really special to my heart, only for many reasons. For one is when I lived in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, it was a hub for trafficking, where those interstates come through. They transition people so quickly, and it's men, women, and children, and boys and girls. So it's not just specific to any type. I've seen it a lot, specifically in Myrtle Beach. I just returned from Las Vegas from a Medicaid conference. Was able to kind of go through some parts of Vegas where you probably shouldn't go. Just wanted to see what was happening, and it was very rampant there as well. So for us in the Caribbean, I think that this is a special topic. And I'm really happy that we're coming together as a community. The biggest thing is that looking out for those signs and making sure that we're protecting each other. During the COVID environment, so many people are in lockdown mode still, and so we're not going to be able to see or hear or really be able to identify as easily. So I think that for us, this is a really important topic. So I just want to say, I'm not sure he's on the phone right now because I can't see, but just a special thank you, a happy Friday, great topic area, and I'm going to listen as long as I can. So thank you, everybody, and I look forward to it. I'm assuming this is recorded so I can go back and watch. So take care, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Gomez. Dr. V, you're muted.
Oh yeah, I'm always muted. I wanted to thank Commissioner Gomez, yes, because in the task force, you have supported the intake emergency and the whole DHS team continuously. And I thank you so much for allowing the DHS team to be very active, be involved, and share with your, and Ms. Henry as well, sharing what you're doing 365 years around to prepare children and prepare us for the territory as we get ready for doing this hurricane season. Thank you again. I'm sending it back to Mika Fred, because once I hear another commissioner, I will let her know. Go right ahead, Mika.
Okay, so we're gonna move along in our schedule. Director Testemark, I think Director Testemark wants to go ahead. Director Testemark, could you go ahead and say your remarks?
Great. Is she mute? Mika, is she muted? Okay, tell her to unmute so she can hear.
Director Testemark, please unmute yourself. We're ready to hear you and your comments. But okay, so me to be annoying again, I put the number in our chat box, which is 1-888-373-7888, the victim report number for human trafficking. So I'm gonna say it over and over and over again so everybody know that number.
Okay, move right along, Mika. I'll go ahead with what the next person on the agenda.
So I'm going to introduce Ms. Kaki Barrett. I read her piece online on CBS about human trafficking and children. So Therapist Barrett, are you ready? And I just saw them. Okay, I see, I'm gonna go ahead. I guess we're gonna get back to Therapist Barrett. We're gonna go to Attorney Perry. Attorney Perry, are you ready?
Okay. Dr. Mika Fred, are you frozen? Okay, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. I can't
No.
hear you.
No, we're trying to get everybody to unmute their self so they can go ahead and present.
Okay.
We're
Alright.
over here trying to tell everybody, unmute yourself. If you're ready to present, go ahead and present.
Okay. Mhm.
Good morning, Dr. Victor, Dr. Fred. How are you?
Hi, thank you, Attorney Perry.
It's good to see you this morning.
Same here.
So I have prepared and feel free to interrupt if you need to introduce someone else or do what you need to do. But I just wanted to say, and I always say in court, on behalf of the people of the Virgin Islands, thank you, Dr. Victor and Dr. Fred, and all of our colleagues on today for all of the good work in drawing attention to this issue. And I'm deeply hopeful that as the Department of Justice in the Virgin Islands, as well as all of the knowledge that you're spreading, if that can come together, we could put together successful prosecutions, meaning both we spot human trafficking, we then gather the evidence for human trafficking using our partners in the federal departments and VIPD, and then we actually bring this to a successful prosecution and send a message throughout the territory. So it's a pleasure to be here today. I've put together a set of PowerPoint slides related to really two things. The first being Virgin Islands Code, to be sure everyone's on the same page with what we have to work with here, which is a very good law. And then the second part, Dr. Fred asked that we look into some of the cultural aspects of human trafficking. So the lens I've taken on that is from the perspective of prosecutors in the courts, because there are a lot of hurdles we need to overcome to bring not only our victims, but our witnesses on board to be sure that we actually can get a successful outcome in court. Idea being, it's not just spotting human trafficking and gathering the evidence, it's also bringing the matter to successful trial beyond a reasonable doubt. So if I could get your grace and patience and assistance, I'm going to try to share my screen. So it should hopefully be going to a PowerPoint. Despite all of these court hearings in Zoom, I'm maybe not the most electronically proficient. So don't be shy in giving me guidance. It says the host has disabled screen sharing.
That's Dr. McGrath. We need Dr. McGrath help us with that.
Dr. Victor, I thought you controlled all the strings.
Listen, I do not, okay? Shoot. If I would condone a trick, I lock everybody up and put them in jail and committing crime.
Can you please be on my jury, my next jury pool?
I don't know.
Attorney Perry, try again. I'm here with Dr. McGrath, who's our IT expert.
Outstanding. Can you see this?
Yes.
Am I in the corner or no?
You're on the side.
Okay, perfect. All right. Gentlemen, ladies, good morning. My name's Timothy Perry. I'm a prosecutor at the Virgin Islands Department of Justice. I serve as an assistant attorney general. So I handle criminal matters, primarily homicides, drug dealers, unfortunately, blood and guts and all these terrible things. However, I'm very fortunate today to be invited to talk about human trafficking, which is a case or a type of case that our office would certainly handle. So the goal today, I want to present to you human trafficking in the Virgin Islands Code, but then we're going to dovetail and talk about some of the issues that we face in court in bringing these matters to trial. So our objectives today, I want to give you a historical approach first, in terms of how we historically have treated these issues. And then that will flow into how our code is a living law book in the Virgin Islands, that through our efforts and the efforts of our elected representatives, we can actually change the law, which is what we did here in 2018 with the Human Trafficking Act. And then we'll conclude, and then I'd like to take any questions you have, but thoughts on prosecuting what I call and many call a hidden crime. So trafficking in this territory, a snapshot of what it looks like here, and also some cultural issue spotting in terms of problems that we have bringing these matters to court. So looking back in time, historically, we have penalized the prostitute. And if you look under 14 VIC 1622, these are the code sections historically that have been used, in effect criminalizing anyone who engages in prostitution. I teach at the police academy. My students there love this. Anyone who engages in prostitution or assignation, a secret appointment for lovemaking. It's a beautiful old word, which actually speaks to the fact that this is a very old code section. So if you look, anyone who procures or solicits a prostitute, anyone who maintains a house of prostitution, permits a place to be used for prostitution. It's a very old code section. The penalty is $100 and 180 days in jail. I want you to anchor this in your mind, because when you see what our new law does, you'll see what a different perspective we have on, first of all, what should be criminalized, and second of all, the penalties that attach to it. So what you will notice with the new law when we get there is not only is it no longer, well, prostitution is still on the books as a crime under 1622, this misdemeanor, but what you'll notice is under the human trafficking code, it actually creates a presumptive innocence and a no prosecute related to someone who is trapped as a victim in human trafficking. So before we leave this, I want you to note it's a misdemeanor, $100 fine. Also note it's from December 8th, 1942. The territory was very young at that time. That is a municipal ordinance that is still on the books from 1942. Thankfully, in 2018, we have a very different approach. I'll also draw your attention very quickly to vagrancy statute. That criminalizes, quote, being a common prostitute or accosting a stranger for purposes of prostitution, being a night walker, houses of ill fame, all of these very old terms. That is a 90-day jail sentence. It is still a misdemeanor. Again, we're looking at a very old code section. This is from 1921, when the territory was in its infancy. And I will just note, we've come a long way. So back when Bill Clinton was president in 1992, there was a little more emphasis on human trafficking and these types of violence against women and these types of crimes. But the solution in 1992 was to increase the penalty, increase the fine. That's shocking compared to what we're doing now. So moving forward, I want to draw your attention to the new law with respect to the Virgin Islands and human trafficking. I put up a picture of the World Trade Center here because I'm trying to show, or trying to lock it in our heads, the beauty of Virgin Islands code is that it is a living code. So for example, the criminal laws of the legislature of the Virgin Islands change over time. We need simply, it needs to be Dr. Victor and Dr. Fred and our other experts and colleagues putting their heads together. We can change the law or change parts of the law as long as we have a senator who's a sponsor. So if we look for a moment, there's a code section, not related to human trafficking, but it proves our point. 256, placing and detonating bombs. You know, that's a 20-year offense. That code section did not exist until 2002. It is a direct reaction to what we learned about terror and terrorism in 2001 in September. So it's a remarkable thing that we can change the law. Is the beauty of being in a democratic place. So thankfully for our purposes, that was done and done really effectively in terms of all of the areas that the human trafficking law covers. Maybe less effectively in terms of, and this is why what we're doing today is so important, less effectively in terms of launching prosecution using these laws. So I'll draw your attention now to the 2018 law. Oops. It's called the Virgin Islands Uniform Prevention of and Remedies for Human Trafficking Act. It's in Title 14, which is important for us because it situates human trafficking law in criminal code. If you would like to look this law up yourself, I would strongly encourage you to do so. The best place to find our code is using LexisNexis. Unfortunately, our printed code books in the VI are from maybe 2013, so they wouldn't actually contain this law. However, the every law that's passed in the VI flows into Lexis, which is our legal database. It's available to citizens of the Virgin Islands for free. If you Google vicourts.org, you can then click on resources and Virgin Islands Code. So I would strongly encourage you to pull up your own copy of the code, and you can look at these laws yourself. Moving forward, I'm starting today in terms of the law of human trafficking with a note on definitions, because what the law does in effect, and it's a very well-written law. This could be a model law or certainly draws from model laws all around the United States. It defines what coercion is, and that's really the heart of human trafficking in terms of how situations are set up, where usually a young female, not always, is put into a position where the trafficking is occurring. And it really, what it stems out of is coercion, and the code defines it for us. So we're going to spend a little time on this so you can see how the law takes everything we know to be true about human trafficking and then criminalizes it. So in effect, if someone is using coercion, that's going to be the criminal act. Coercion is defined in many ways, thankfully, in the code. It's a lot of tools for us as law enforcement and other officials interested in stomping out human trafficking. Coercion means the threat or use of force. It can also mean causing an individual to believe that if you don't perform, it will result in the use of force. Classic definitions of coercion, but the thing about human trafficking is that coercion is more insidious than just threat of force. It in fact also includes abuse of law or legal process. For example, threatening deportation, controlling or threatening to control access to a controlled substance, meaning getting someone addicted to drugs so they're trapped in the system. Destruction or taking or destruction of identification documents. So if we're dealing with immigrants who are illegal to the country or only here from another country using documents, you frequently see someone engaging in human trafficking who seizes these documents and will not release them. Also, the use of debt bondage, which of course is, we are probably familiar with, is a situation where someone is promised travel to the United States for a new and positive life, but then is forced to work off the debt of the cost of that trip. And sadly, unfortunately, coercion also includes taking advantage of someone with a physical or mental impairment. So drawing your attention to those definitions, now let's get into the law itself. The law criminalizes in two ways. First, those who engage in the trafficking of others, and it differentiates between minors and adults, penalizing for adults, less so, or I guess less severe than the trafficking in minors. But it also differentiates between sexual servitude, which is I think what we traditionally think of in terms of human trafficking. It's running a sex servitude ring, but it also modern day human slavery, forced labor. So trafficking, we're attacking the people who engage in trafficking others, minors and adults, for either forced labor or sexual servitude. But then we're also going to attack and criminalize the people who knowingly patronize a victim of human trafficking, meaning someone who lays the money on the table to engage in what is an illegal sex act with someone who has been trafficked. So we're looking at those two different kinds of criminal conduct under this new law. So under 133 of Virgin Islands Code, 14 Virgin Islands Code, section 133, a person commits the offense of trafficking in the Virgin Islands if they knowingly recruit, transport, transfer, harbor, receive, isolate, maintain, or entices an individual. Again, and it's in furtherance of those two things, forced labor or sexual servitude. I really, as a prosecutor, you read the way this is written, and you also take it in context of our aiding and abetting statutes or our conspiracy statutes. You can charge these things in conjunction. So if someone is part of a chain in which human trafficking, part of the transport occurs through this person, they're then harbored in this place, they're then received here, and then isolated here in the US Virgin Islands, you could technically charge everyone along that chain by using section 133, but also charge it with conspiracy and aiding and abetting. Again, human trafficking, what we're criminalizing is the trafficking of others for the goal of forced labor, which again is basically a modern human slavery, or sexual servitude. I believe the second is far more common in the Virgin Islands. So, with respect to forced labor is defined as someone uses coercion to force someone to provide labor or services. We've defined coercion, so you have a sense of how we're forcing people into these situations. Now, let me also, not to jump ahead too far, but one of the issues we run into in court, not only on this, but these dovetail with domestic violence issues. You see a lot of similar dynamics. We run into an issue where jurors and, even law enforcement can't always understand the behaviors that people are putting forward without recognizing that they're the victim of coercion. So we'll talk about that near the end of the presentation. But as we've talked about, coercion means not only threat of force, but also abuse of the legal process, taking somebody's documents, debt bondage, those types of things. So trafficking can occur in the context of forced labor, but also sexual servitude, which is defined in 135. Anyone who maintains or makes available a minor for purposes of engaging in commercial sexual activities, or an adult for commercial sexual activity. Again, we look to our definitions. It's very helpful to us as prosecutors. Commercial sexual activity means the exchange of anything of value. It doesn't have to be cash. It can even be promises for later remuneration. Sexual activity, as we would expect, includes anything in effect for gratification. I won't get into this, it's too early in the morning for this mess. However, I will note to you that it also includes sexually explicit performances. It isn't only physical touching of intimate areas. Knowingly, and again, look at how beautifully this code is written, and I'm not trying to be a code nerd this morning, but knowingly doesn't mean you have to know that the girl is a victim of human trafficking. It can be that you are acting with deliberate ignorance or reckless disregard for the truth. Meaning, if you go into that situation, you go into that club, you go into that basement, and you're ignoring the reality all around you that's clear, then you don't have to prove knowledge that the defendant knew that human trafficking was involved. And just for, perhaps this is obvious, minor is defined in the code as anyone under 18. So penalties. If it is an adult who has been trafficked, it is a 25-year offense, not more than. So made it basically up to 25 years. If someone has trafficked a minor, and this is where the code has teeth, it's not less than 25 years. Now remember back, we used to criminalize prostitution, and it was what, $100 fine? Now we are talking about someone who is trafficking another. We switched the whole focus of the law in the Virgin Islands, and it's not a $100 fine, 90 days in jail. We're talking about 25 years mandatory if you traffic in a minor. I believe that our laws are very strong here and would strongly encourage a local prosecution if we can get the evidence together of human trafficking. That is with respect to trafficking. Trafficking is charged in conjunction with forced labor or sexual servitude. Forced labor for an adult is not more than 30 years if convicted. If you're trafficking in a minor for forced labor, also not more than 30 years. Where the teeth come back again is for sexual servitude. If you are trafficking in a minor for sexual servitude, you're charged not only with trafficking, but also 135 sexual servitude. That can be a life sentence in jail, depending upon the severity of the offense. It is at minimum not less than 30 years. There is no judicial discretion. So if there's a conviction, it's not less than 30 years. Now, there's some good wrinkles in here when we try these cases. It isn't a defense to the crime if the defendant comes in and says, wait, I thought she was an adult, or wait, she agreed. It is not a defense in this case as set forth by the code. So again, now coming back out, we penalize those who engage in trafficking, but also those who patronize victims. With respect to patronizing a victim of sexual servitude is made criminal under the new code section 14 VIC 136. You exchange anything of value to engage in sexual activity with another individual if you know that individual is a victim of sexual servitude. Go back to our definition of knowledge. You don't have to know as in you've been told. You can know by acting with deliberate ignorance or reckless disregard. This is very valuable to us as people who care about victims of domestic violence and sexual servitude, or excuse me, human trafficking, because it means that someone can't claim ignorance. But it also means that our investigators need to have their eyes open and note all of the indicia, the factors that you would see that would lead someone to believe that in fact human trafficking is going on. The penalties, not more than 20 years for a juvenile. I want to jump briefly into, so the penalties with respect to patronizing a minor is 15 years if you have the intent. Okay, jumping ahead a little bit. So part of the issue we face in the Virgin Islands, it isn't just that an individual is trafficking others. It's the fact that sometimes an individual is connected to a business and using that business to traffic others or to profit from trafficking others. The law is good too under section 138, 14 Virgin Islands Code, section 138. We can attack business entities as well, meaning if a business knowingly engages in conduct that's human trafficking, or someone working for that business benefits the business or doesn't stop human trafficking, the court can, in addition to all of the things we've already discussed in terms of fines, they can fine of $1 million an offense. So you literally could drive a business that is operating in this way out of business, meaning the owner would go to jail for the mandatory minimum time. The business itself would be shuttered because you can fine it out of existence. I'll note here too, it also means you can no longer get government contracts. All right, friends, there are some other additions to the law that give it some more teeth. Again, think in your head, we used to criminalize prostitutes, quote unquote, streetwalkers as $100 fine misdemeanors in 1921 and 1942. Now in 2018 and forward, we are identifying, and I suspect a lot of our speakers today are going to identify as well, we're identifying the most vulnerable in our society. So under 139, if someone who has been trafficked was in a shelter, was a victim of domestic violence, was a victim of sexual assault, a runaway youth, a foster child, a girl who is homeless, it's an additional 10-year offense, 10-year fine, 10-year penalty. So long and short of it, I really like the law. I think we need to use the law now. We need to locate and search out and find and seek and destroy human trafficking on the island, because anecdotally, we all know it exists. I'll also note there's a good forfeiture provision, meaning anyone who engages in human trafficking, we can forfeit any real or personal property. That means their home, that means the business they were using in terms of the raw business itself. You can even forfeit the car that was used to facilitate the offense. The only other section that's this strongly worded for us in the Virgin Islands is for drug dealer liability in terms of asset forfeiture. So it's a good set of provisions. We also protect the victim by ordering restitution and guaranteeing confidentiality in this code. And we'll close out our analysis of the code by just pointing out we have come a long and positive way, and it's through good work of the people of the Virgin Islands. The law was written in 2018, completely refocuses away from criminalizing the female or what we would now consider the victim of a human trafficking, and switches gears entirely by offering an affirmative defense and immunity. So if you are, for example, a victim of domestic violence, and we'll see in a minute, many victims of domestic violence are worried about themselves being arrested. We, through 14 Virgin Islands Code, Section 145, have created an affirmative defense. So people can no longer be charged with prostitution if that prostitution was being a result of human trafficking. So the law is really good because, again, it refocuses us away from, first of all, not showing a whole lot of interest in the issue. If it's a $100 fine and a misdemeanor, that doesn't really show that the government and the people are behind criminalizing this. It's a minor offense. We've shifted from there to, in some cases, 15, 25-year mandatory penalties for trafficking in juveniles. But at the same time, we've also refocused everything to the idea that it isn't necessarily the conduct of prostitution that is the evil in our society. It is, in fact, the people who are taking advantage of and trafficking in people for, again, what we call under the code, sexual servitude. So that's my bit on the Virgin Islands Criminal Code. I think it's important as a foundational piece that we understand what the code gives us in terms of tools. You could even call them weapons to try to combat this. We've got a good law. It's well written. And again, that's a direct reflection of good work by people in the Virgin Islands because, again, it's living code. The only way to change law here is for people like us to come together and write a law, see an issue, write a law, propose it, and then support it through passage by the legislature. Last thing on code, under section 149, it does demand that we display public awareness signs. Hopefully we've got some folks with some deep pockets on the call today. Maybe we have an issue that I haven't seen any of these signs up, maybe some paper signs tacked up somewhere, but under the code, we are supposed to be displaying public awareness signs throughout the territory, particularly in the ports. I suspect it's an issue of funding. That the code is well intentioned to provide that we have to do this, but maybe we haven't allocated the funds. And just anecdotally, when I also prosecute drug crimes, we didn't have ticket books with respect to marijuana. So the first year and a half of the new marijuana law, the officers couldn't write a ticket even if they wanted to because we didn't have a ticket book. Why? Because we hadn't allocated funding yet. So this might be the same issue with this public awareness sign. So switching gears, now that we kind of have hopefully the context of the law in the Virgin Islands for human trafficking, I just have some thoughts that I'd like to share and then maybe get your thoughts, I hope, or maybe this will kind of stimulate our discussion about how to prosecute these crimes. And what Dr. Frett had requested is that we talk about some of the cultural issues that really are barriers in, so the lens I'm taking is cultural issues or language issues that are barriers to prosecution. So trafficking in the territory, and hopefully we'll spot some of the issues. I think the first issue is that of training. We don't do a good job quite yet of training our law enforcement officers, meaning we need to increase awareness of what we should even be looking for. I will tell you, I teach the police academy, the new recruits, the last 3 classes. I've done an insert on human trafficking and what to spot. But these are our youngest officers. Hopefully they're out in patrol and will be in a position to spot these things. But we could continue with respect to trying to get better training for our officers so they know what they're looking for. The second observation is that we need to increase cultural competency in our justice system. In a minute, I'll show you some slides. Criminal justice in the United States is based on the common law. It's a very consistent system throughout the states, but that system is inconsistent with some of the victims we have who are human trafficking victims. And lastly, I think, the key of this is going to be connecting resources, because if you have a victim of human trafficking, the chances are that her level of sophistication and empowerment, and I'm not trying to speak in genders, I think in the VI, most victims of human trafficking, at least anecdotally, are female, but she will be in need of good services. Really no different than if we have someone in significant mental health distress or parenting distress. We need to connect the resources to the person so they're even in a position where they can go to court on these matters. Okay, so what does a human trafficking arrest look like in the Virgin Islands? Well, the most recent that I'm aware of was in 2019. We had VIPD receive a call, and the call was from the victim's mother. And she said, in effect, my daughter is acting strange. Can you look into it? So VIPD followed up. They did a welfare check, and lo and behold, learned that in fact from December of 18 until August of 19, the defendant had recruited young women from abroad, Dominican Republic in this case, smuggled them into the Virgin Islands, housed them in a residence at St. Thomas, required them to engage in commercial sex at the defendant's nightclub. And the basis of that was to repay the debt for the smuggling that got the girls into the country. So the case came to law enforcement's attention through VIPD. It was a cold call. Thank God the right person took the call. Investigators were dispatched, and ultimately it resulted in an arrest. Now, it's important. I speak on training a lot in terms of what we need to do to support our officers' good works. And so what I have here, just very briefly, this is from the Department of Homeland Security, just so it puts us on the same page of what we should be looking for in our own community. Homeland Security has identified a number of factors with respect to determining or noticing who may be a victim of human trafficking. So firstly, does a person appear disconnected from community or their friends, houses of worship? Are they isolated? If so, it could be an indicia that they are, taken with other things, a victim of human trafficking. Is there a child who stopped attending school? Now, not to bring a COVID bent into this, I see Dr. Fred and her mask. I've got my mask right here, and am happy to say, no judgments, but I'm vaccinated. Has your child stopped attending school? This is very difficult to tell during COVID times. Many, many victims of human trafficking are juveniles, and it's very difficult to get a good grasp on who should be in school and are they attending school every day when we can't tell in person. It makes our job more difficult. Hopefully, with all prayer, we are moving out of COVID times. Is there a sudden change in behavior in an individual? These are the things that could lead us to believe human trafficking is going on. Is the person disoriented or confused or showing any signs of abuse? A classic sign of abuse, and our domestic violence experts are trained similarly, are there bruises in various stages of healing, meaning some are old, some are medium, some are new. Also, are there bruises in other spots, like the soft spots? So if a child falls, they fall on their elbows or they fall on their wrists. They don't fall on the soft spot of their arm. So you can see bruising in strange spots can be indicia of human trafficking as well. Is the person in temperament, demeanor, fearful, timid, or submissive? These are all indicators or indicia of human trafficking. Are they always in the company of someone who seems to be controlling them? Do they appear to be coached if you're asking them questions? Are the conditions where the child or the individual is living really just out of character and unsuitable? Does the child or person appear to have a lack of personal possessions? Are they freely able to move? So again, these are some of the factors that Department of Homeland Security suggests that not just law enforcement, it should be practitioners across the board, Department of Human Services, all of these areas. What are the things we should be looking for when we come into contact with vulnerable people? So the question I think to ask is, who in our community is best positioned to make these observations, but then make the connection to human trafficking, and then make the connection to actually investigating it as a crime? The ending part of my information today, or my piece today, is drawn largely from the Human Trafficking in State Courts Collaborative. And I'll draw your attention to, there's some really magnificent research at htcourts.org. It's a valuable resource that pulls together many across the United States centers for court improvement. And I guess I would say my lens on how do we improve human trafficking prosecution is to be culturally competent in part. what does human trafficking look like in general in the United States? We don't have very good numbers in the Virgin Islands for data. In fact, we don't have great numbers in the United States always. It is anywhere approximately from 15,000 to 50,000 people. That's a huge gap, and that's a lot of people. Now, you take it to our level in the US Virgin Islands, there is almost certainly human trafficking here, and it's a question of how do we root that out. There's no estimates related to people who don't speak English, either as victims, witnesses, or traffickers. This is really problematic because we are counting on English speakers both to go to court as witnesses and victims. It's a problematic thing that we don't even have data on this. Moving forward, it is safe to say that there is a dominant culture in the courts of the United States of America. That is in contrast to the culture of many people who are brought to the country and then trapped in a situation of human trafficking. And we'll get to a little more on that in a minute. I do want to draw your attention. This is very concerning. The most recent data that I could find is from 2018, and I'll draw your attention to the Federal Human Trafficking Report. There's one done for every state and territory of the United States. We in the US Virgin Islands, federal and local, currently have, at least in 2018, 0 human trafficking cases, new, active, or convictions. That's 2018 for our territory. Those numbers, to me at least, are very concerning because I think, at least anecdotally, we all know that this is a place where people migrate through and there's almost certain to be human trafficking here. And we certainly know from that arrest in 2019. But as of 2018, there were no criminal cases active or convictions. So again, what Dr. Frett and Dr. Victor and all of our partners are doing, and again, thank you to UVI, which is my wife's happy home as a professor, drawing light and attention to this issue is just critical because these numbers don't change unless we spot human trafficking and bring convictions to bear. And I would just tell you, criminal labor appears to be less of an issue. It does appear to be more of a sexual servitude issue. We are one of 49 states and territories, meaning almost the entire country, that fail to initiate any labor trafficking prosecutions. So for us, I think the issue is definitely, it tends to migrate here at least toward issues of sexual servitude and abuse. Where is human trafficking in the United States? Or let me say it differently. Where is human trafficking observed and prosecuted in the United States? Well, here's a map of the nation, and you can see that New York, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, Illinois, California, you see a lot of these states. These are the states that have a lot more defendants, meaning there's really an active prosecution scene there with respect to human trafficking. I suspect many of these states provided the model for our new law, 2018 law on domestic violence. And I suspect that many of these states, the guidance that we could get from places that are successfully prosecuting and policing would be valuable to us. Again, this just emphasizes, again, of all of the criminal cases related to human trafficking, again, human trafficking is both forced labor and sex trafficking, or in the VI, it's called sexual servitude. More than 95% are related to sex crimes. Going back in time, that's 2018. As of 2016, we did have 5 potential persons trafficked in the Virgin Islands. That sounds like a low number. That is a large number for such a small place. Okay, so to close out, I want to draw your attention to the work of a scholar named John Martin. John Martin has work out addressing the complexities of language and culture in human trafficking involved cases. So I would suggest to you, and one of the things we need to work on is there's a gap between where our victims and witnesses are and where the court and the justice system are. So the dynamics of human trafficking make it very difficult to do many things: identify trafficking victims, identifying the criminals who are trafficking victims, determining the needs of our victims, and then providing successful outcomes. Drawing your attention first to language. Language is a direct component of culture. It's the primary tool with which we're going to use to gather information, ultimately even to testify at trial. And again, you know, I prosecute a lot of guns in the territory, and there's a distinction to be made between, okay, VIPD got the gun. That is a huge win for the community from that arrest. But that is a very different thing than getting a conviction for the gun, which results in a mandatory minimum sentence and a message to the community that we take guns seriously. So it's really a two-step process. And, you know, it isn't just locating the firearm, it's then successfully prosecuting the firearm to guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't get to guilty beyond a reasonable doubt without testimony at trial. Testimony at trial is a direct, it stems directly from language. And let me tell you, I've been involved in many, many trials or many, many hearings where, where the victim or the witness in the case is for example, a Spanish speaker or a French Creole speaker, or generally the whole hearing slows to a grinding halt and we bring in translators. But it has to be done because many of the victims of human trafficking are not going to be English speakers. So it's very difficult. Language is not simply the words we use, but as we consider how do we reach out to domestic violence and human trafficking victims who are from other places. Many other cultures have verbal and nonverbal expressions. It helps us understand, you know, how do you show sincerity or anger or respect? Do these things look different in different cultures? Are they conveyed differently than in traditional English? Culture, I believe, is going to be addressed by the speakers to follow me today. The definition, at least given by the Court Improvement Project, is culture is commonly shared, largely taken for granted assumptions about our goals or value or authority, the way we know, the nature of the way we perceive truth, human nature, human relationships, and it's a collective knowledge. So, you know, Dr. Fred and I can sit down and have a conversation, and there's certain basic things that we're communicating without even talking about because we share a common background. Now, if someone is coming from another place and in a different language, their entire perception has been shaped by, you know, different things. And as a result, the way they perceive court even and justice and you know, I have law enforcement officers who, you know, in my perception are the friendliest, most outgoing male you could meet, immediately disarming, very good victim officer. But if you're from a different cultural background, certain things are just going to be missed and it creates problems. So with respect to culture, this is the lens that I think is important, at least my piece to consider. Culture in the courts. So familiarity with the way that our court system and the Department of Justice and the justice system and law enforcement work tends to be very low. The way our system in the United States Virgin Islands works is not well understood by people who are new to the country, let alone our most sensitive victims. So in addition, many of the countries, if people are fleeing a country, it implies that there's a level of distress and dysfunction in that country. Countries where authorities and justice institutions, the courts can't be trusted, there's a low level of trust. So when law enforcement or social services or the courts approach a victim or a witness, or a victim in particular, we're here to help, there's a low level of trust that justice can be delivered or that help will actually be forthcoming. And I remember this 100 years ago, before I went to law school, I was a public school teacher in inner city DC. And we had a large population of people who were relatively new to the country, some legal, some not, but their kids were in school. And you could see at parent conferences even, and this is anecdotal in a much lower high stakes environment than the courts where jail is on the line. At parent teacher conferences, certain groups of people, no matter the amount of outreach, were not likely to show up. And if they did show up to parent conferences, were not likely to speak. And, you know, not as an issue of language barrier, but as an issue of comfort and trust in the system and comfort with the system. So if you've never had a positive experience with education, why would you assume it's going to be different? We face the same issues with our courts. And, you know, I'm picturing a couple of my really good VIPD detectives who are great with victims. Certain victims might not be receptive to what works so well with most Virgin Islanders in supporting Virgin Islands victims. So that there is a discrepancy in terms of people can talk past each other. I don't know quite how to solve that, and I think that could be part of a think tank here. But it seems to me that, you know, if we were to identify victims of human trafficking or experts in human trafficking, exercises like today's in terms of bringing knowledge could be helpful for our judges, it could be helpful for our attorneys, and it could be helpful for social services and law enforcement. So this is, again, Dr. Martin's or John Martin's work. He describes a culture of the courts, and the culture of the courts in the United States tend to be European, American, English extraction in base, where they're based in. Now, that doesn't always align with how people of Latino cultures or Mexican, African, Japanese cultures might view the court system. And again, this is Dr. Martin's work. He example gives the storytelling. Our witnesses tell stories to the jury at trial. It's difficult because if the system is based upon kind of a linear A, then B, and then C happens, you run into problems if the individual is coming from a cultural background where stories aren't told that way. Stories aren't fact-driven, but instead, you know, they're based upon, and as you see here, an extensive back and forth or backtracking or expecting that people will know how to read between the lines or interpreting that certain silences are in fact part of the story. That's not how our court systems are designed. So as we think about how to prep witnesses for court, designing victim witness advocates, and how we train or continue to train our social service providers and law enforcement, understanding that there's a basic difference is really important. There's another element too, and you hate to talk about this, but victim behavior, and this is exactly the same case in domestic violence. And my good friend and talented colleague, Detective Hunt, is going to be testifying later, presenting later. And I encourage you to ask her about domestic violence victims, because we're really talking about the same thing. Victim behavior can be twisted and distorted by the fact that they've been made victims. And when they come into court, they don't present in the way that courts and juries think that they should. So just for example, if you're a chronic victim constantly put in trauma, your personality characteristics might not be consistent with what the jury's expecting you to do. I can't tell you how many people I've said, okay, you know, be sure you come to court, wear your church clothes. And then people come to court, you know, wearing all sorts of things, and the court tosses them out and says you have to put on extra clothes and all of this. And, you know, you're jokingly thinking, well, what church do you go to? But in reality, what you're looking at is just, it's a different cultural expectation of what's appropriate in court, or it could be a result of victimization and trauma. We need to be aware of that as we approach these types of issues. There's also an issue if someone has been trafficked, that's very coercive. They may have been coached not to trust people involved in justice. Also, as we know, statistically, repeated abuse by adults when someone's a child can lead to a general mistrust of adults. And all of the service providers we're talking about, I suspect, are adults. You know, and then there's the same elements as domestic violence. There's many reasons why, you know, someone can't break the cycle. Who's paying the bills? Who's keeping the roof over your head? Who's taking care of your friends and family? The same incentives to trust the trafficker more than criminal justice system or social services is present. Victims might fear the consequences. And this is where our law is really good, because it says we're going to give you immunity, at least for prostitution. I would tell you the prosecutors I work with are not looking to charge someone who has been a victim of human trafficking for the drugs that they became addicted to, or the petty larcenies, or something else of that nature. So finally, it's just important to consider the dynamics of human trafficking, because it is so coercive, make it difficult to spot who the victims are, but then ultimately to bring them to trial. Dr. Victor, Dr. Fret, and to all of our colleagues and our host at the university, thank you for the opportunity to be part of the task force, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am happy to take questions or hang on until you need questions. But again, I just appreciate the opportunity to share information about not only our new law, which really is the tool that we have to end human trafficking in the territory, but also some of the challenges we face, not just in the courts, but as service providers and law enforcement, to getting these matters, getting trust with the victims and witnesses to actually bring these matters to trial. So thank you very much.
Thank you, AG Perry. You are a day one supporter. We thank you for being there day one of our first presentation with CYTF. We are so appreciative of all the stuff you did for our first conference. So I'm gonna ask our crowd, our Zoom crowd, does anybody have questions for Attorney Perry?
I do. Hi, Nurse Francis from Gomez Elementary School. Before COVID, or I guess let's say when you can, are you going into schools to talk about this in terms of, I know when they're younger, I'm in elementary school, that we, talk about don't talk to strangers, but getting into the fine tuning up to teenagers of what they should be looking for before they walk off with somebody they sort of know, or to give more information. Is that something that's being shared or will be shared on a regular basis? Probably not even from middle school on up. Just wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I unfortunately am not aware of the educational campaign in the schools. It seems to me that, and I'm saying this as a former public school teacher, so I taught 5 years in inner city DC. We are in the schools, and I taught in middle school as well. I taught 8th graders. So I hear what you're saying. We are, particularly that 8th grade, 7th, 8th, 9th, and high schoolers, we really are the first responders in a way, and the best position to spot well, the indicia or the indicators of human trafficking. But I totally agree with you to present the information. So the last conference that we had to discuss this, there was a very effective video that was played out at Vitima. I believe it was from one of our federal partners. As long as it was appropriate, as so deemed by, the principals and the powers that be, it would be a very effective teaching tool, because it in effect presented a couple of young women who, weren't even particularly vulnerable, who were pulled into human trafficking and then not able to escape. I think in the Virgin Islands, anecdotally, again, we don't have good data, which is part of the issue as well, or good data that I'm aware of, was able to find. Our problem is really twofold. We have a problem in terms of local, meaning Virgin Islanders, juveniles, born and brought up in the islands, who are abused. We also have an issue, and I think this may be because we are at a crossroads. We're the gateway to the United States, if you think about it. We have a lot of people, again, anecdotally, so I speak with some caution, who are brought from vulnerable countries, vulnerable positions in vulnerable countries, may not know the language, may not have any support network here, meaning no friends and no family other than the person who contracted to bring them in. I question whether those individuals even make it to school, which is deeply problematic. So if they are at school, then we as teachers and educators and nurses and school counselors can make observations, based on what we see and what we know to be normal human conduct. But the problem is, what happens if people aren't even getting to school? And then that's going to be more of the onus and burden is going to be on law enforcement all of this has to dovetail with VIPD too, right? We are technically a community prosecution jurisdiction, or excuse me, community policing jurisdiction. But that requires officers to get out of their cruisers and get to know the people in the community so they can observe when, wait a minute, this incident on Brookman Road, something's going on in the basement of that building. You know, I drive by Holla Holla every day. What's going on up in there? I mean, it's going to take that kind of a boots on the ground approach too, to catch the people who maybe aren't our local Virgin Islanders going to school every day, but this whole other insidious, angle on human trafficking. But it's a very good question. I'll volunteer. Dr. Frett, I think we've spoken by email at least about getting in the school to do a law blitz so we can start getting people getting to think about becoming Virgin Islands attorneys in the future. But we certainly could expand that. But I think it needs to be social, not just law enforcement, but social services to talk about how we also support people. Because, I mean, if you're 14, 15, 16 years old, it is a heck of a leap to go from where you at least know you have a bed every night to who knows. So forgive me, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, it's eye-opening, and yes, it's a good start. Thank you.
Attorney Perry, this is Dr. Victor. I think you're in point when you say that, because the research shows that 60% of those individuals who are trafficked are from foster care child welfare systems. That's abuse, neglect. And I know that in DHS, when a case occurs, how does it get to you? Does it get to you where a person anonymously calls DHS and education is a part of that? And then how is your office contacted? Is it contacted at the end, or what is that process looking like?
So prosecutors, unfortunately, usually are in a position, we're very responsive. Mm-hmm. We are not investigators. Now, I know the AG is trying to build up our capacity in terms of hiring special agents, in terms of creating a more investigatory wing at Department of Justice. But in terms of prosecutors, we are responsive and reactive to what VIPD locates. Now, it's funny, I've just been working with Lieutenant Martinez, Diana Martinez, who is currently the lieutenant in charge of juvenile. And so the way that it works, I mean, we're working on a case as we speak. And again, this isn't entirely my area, but there will be a report, there will be, a victim or a parent or a friend or a school teacher. Someone will make a report. VIPD is then ethically obligated to make inquiries and follow up. That might involve subpoenas for, I can do subpoenas for phone records to show contact. Sometimes you'll have a juvenile who's been given a phone by an older male. We can pull the phone records and see if those connections are occurring. We can actually do cell tower downloads to find out where people are. We have to build a case or where their phones are connecting. But it all starts with some piece of information getting to the IPD, Lieutenant Martinez, the Detective Bureau investigates, DOJ will assist with that, but until we hit the point of probable cause, there's no arrest made. Before the arrest, other than when we can be proactive and try to help, everything starts at VIPD. Once there's probable cause in an arrest, then DOJ will make a file. It'll be assigned to an attorney general to then prosecute that case.
Okay.
Good morning, Dr. Victor.
Go right ahead, Ms. Reese.
Yeah, good morning. First of all, I want to commend you all for this presentation this morning. And I'm going to speak this morning as the chairperson of the State Advisory Board for Juvenile Justice and Delinquency. I'm very impressed with your presentation, Attorney Perry. And one of the things that I would like, not only Attorney Perry, but this group to advocate for, is for us to educate our community. It's good for us to know all of this information, but I mean, having worked and been around in the community, I hear a lot of things going on, and I know there are a lot of people in high places in this community that are preying on young kids and those kids that are underprivileged. And the only way that we are going to stop is to have a very vibrant, continuous, and aggressive campaign to protect our children. So I just wanted to insert that piece. And I hope in the future that Attorney Perry, you can make this presentation to my board, because that is also a dimension that we are going to have to focus some attention to. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I would be happy to. I think your point is extremely well taken. We need to make war on the idea that it is culturally acceptable to prey on kids. So your words
I
are
agree.
Yes, I thank Mika Fred for, I know we did some workshops, and when she and I spoke with Warren Mitchell, and we talked about the importance of culture in the Caribbean, everything is hush hush, everything is secret. This is similar to COVID. I mean, this principle is similar because a lot of people have gotten positive, what we talked about in the Children Task Force this morning, and not sharing it with a teacher, bringing the children to school, feeling the children still positive. You know, so with same thing, it's like the cultural context, mind your business, keep it to yourself. And it's an implication because, like you said, we have to create a culture that this is not acceptable, and then educating young people that that's not acceptable either. Because that's another thing where young people are trying to engage in these behaviors, high-risk behaviors, and thinking nobody don't have to know is my secret and your secret. So I think Ms. Breeder is correct. That is something that needs to occur, and it's my hope with the Children Task Force we continue to do that, because you said there's a law that already says to put signs up in certain places in the Virgin Islands. So if we have signs, we have laws that say that, then how do we work with the senators or someone else to get, funding, whether it's through LEPC or through other entities?
We do have a senator with us, Dr. V, that's raising her hand and want to participate. Senator Whitaker.
Raise your hand. Okay. This is Senator Whitaker. Yes, Senator Whitaker, you can respond for a moment or two. Go right ahead, ma'am. I see I raised a hand, but what happened?
Good.
Can you, hello? Uh-oh.
Oh, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Good morning. Testing. Can you hear me?
Go right ahead.
Great. Good morning to you. First off, thank you. I want to again really thank the organizers for this. This is a really important discussion. I am Senator Whitaker. I come in a couple of capacities. I'm a former, before my term as a senator, I taught criminal justice, juvenile justice, and I really want to emphasize that, first of all, I really thank the presenter. He brought up really important parts as a the books that are not followed. And that is something that I do religiously as a senator. When it's to my colleagues, in capacity as the Education Committee Chairwoman, I am looking at and also serving as the subcommittee on public safety and health. We really need to address this. The low-hanging fruit is the funding. We are in the midst of budget season, so low-hanging fruit is that if it's not funded, it should be. And that's something I have my staff online. We're engaged. The other part, which is really important, is what's going on in the schools in terms of the education. And there should be a coordinated effort between the Department of Education, Department of Justice, and LEPC. And I look forward to, because one of the things I push for is that we have our stakeholders work together to resolve issues. And so I am committed to this matter. As a mother, as just a member of the community, and certainly I join in this effort. So I see you guys all as my stakeholders. Part of my office, what we do is we reach out to stakeholders, we put them through we have a database, I propose legislation and ask your support and also critical feedback. So I look forward to the continued engagement and to support in this effort. And again, thank you all.
Thank you, Senator Whitaker. I thank you for that. And I know Assistant General Perry, who has been on, because boots on the ground, I call him attorney in the back, boots on the ground, but I think he's correct. We can look and see what already is there that we can, low hanging fruit, and what things we can look at proposing that would, like, for example, why not increase, the prosecution amount of money? If you commit a crime, let's increase that dollar amount. That's important. Those are things that we can do. But as I said, he would be a great team lead with us to see what to best do. But I thank you for your remarks, and I thank you for your sentiment. And please pass that on to your other colleagues. I know the task force is going to send this video link back out to our team members who are invited today, so members get to see and hear, because Commissioner Gomez says she couldn't be on the call for the entire time, but if she got a copy of the presentations, she'll be able to go back and listen. So I think you're correct. It takes all hands on deck to move this dialogue forward, because prosecution is the end result, but what do we do on the front end to educate young people and educate the people who take care of children, to make sure children are safe. So I'm going to bounce this back to Mika Fred and Attorney Perry.
Okay, so we have a question from a staff at Family Resource Center. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ania Stead, and I listened to Attorney Perry, and it was his presentation was very informative. It is very important because we have served for the past, since COVID, we've served over 10 human trafficking cases. And recently, I personally helped a client who came in. She was very traumatized. She got anxiety. She had 2 telephones. She got preyed through social media. She said she was surfing the net and she saw this opportunity where she could come to the Virgin Islands to better her life. And she's only 21 years old. And I'm saying this, and I was very emotional because I have a daughter who's 21 years old and she lives in the mainland by herself. So it's hard when you have young people who come to the Virgin Island and fall prey for all this thing. Is a couple that lives in the Virgin Island who has this thing on social media, and she fall prey to it. She came down here. They had her on a boat and she went through a lot. But when she came to us, we had no choice but to purchase a travel ticket for her because she just couldn't take it. She could not sleep. She was up all the time and she wouldn't eat. So we really had to help her. We provided a ticket. I took her to the airport myself, and she did not have a telephone because she was afraid to use the telephones that the perpetrators gave her. So I had to purchase a telephone for her. So I am in contact with her. The feds are working on that case, and she just did not want to stay on the Virgin Islands anymore. So Attorney Perry, I really thank you. And I think that we need to continue working together to educate our community so they could know what to prepare for, and we should always be prepared. So I thank Dr. Victor and Ms. Fred, Dr. Fred. Yeah, yes, I did take down the numbers, I have them. So thank you for all the information, and I am really thankful that I was invited to this session. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anya Stewart. I thank you, Family Research Center, boots on the ground as well, member of the Children Task Force. But you're correct, it takes everyone to be, and like you said, what is important for the Children Task Force is because we know after any man-made or natural disaster, children are exploited in some capacity. And even with COVID, the research shows that children are not going to school the way they usually do. So their counselors, their teachers, their mentors are not able to see them, and they are at risk for being exploited. So that is why, human services, education, because if we don't deal with it in the front end, then they end up in a jail. At Bureau of Corrections, where I work, and so many of them, when I meet with them at times to do mental health sessions, they complain and tell me they have been abused themselves, they were trafficked themselves, they were neglected themselves, and now they have preyed on someone and not understanding that. And then even so, preying on a 16, 15-year-old individuals and still detached because they came from a community that it was okay to just sleep with younger people and no one said anything. Even though I'm 19 or I'm 21, but I meet a girl that's 16 or 17 years old and she looks like she's as tall as me. She's maybe in a senior in high school, but I had sex with her and now I'm being prosecuted because, wow, I'm 21 or 20 and she's 16, you know, so that's when I say educating young people as well, that this is a crime. This is a crime and it's not culturally accepted. Turning it back to Mika Fred and Attorney Perry.
So right now, again, I know I put the number in the chat box, but I want to add.
Oh, 1 second. Mika Fred, Director Tester Mark is on the line listening, and now she can speak. Get yourself off a speaker. I can't hear you, Lord.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Director Tester Mark from BOC. Please share your comments.
Is she
Hi, good morning. Could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay, yes,
great. Good morning. Thank you all so much for having this is a great and critical topic for this community, for our community. Dr. Victor, I said, is a great segue into me stepping in for a few minutes. It's critical. I really thank you all for bringing this initiative, working on this awareness. And I pray that we continue to educate our community about this important issue. And it's very important that we have that hard conversation, because like so many of you have said in this forum that, you know, in our culture, no one wants to talk about it. Everything is a hush hush. And it's very, very important that we have those hard conversations, because by having those hard conversations, then we enable to now allow, hopefully people will be able to be more comfortable to come forward to say, you know what, you're not alone. This has happened to me. Let me show you how I can help you. And as Dr. Victor stated, as she mentors and talks to individuals here in the prison, it's amazing because our population that we have, I don't know if you all are aware of it, but most of the individuals that's incarcerated that has been convicted, they're convicted for either murder or rape. Murder or rape. And in my 2 years being here, as I travel abroad to speak to those individuals, I began to collect some data. And I wanted to know, tell me about your upbringing. Tell me who raised you, and in that data, it's amazing to me that a lot of them were abused themselves. So they were preyed upon. And then in turn then preyed on someone else, So it's just a mind-boggling to me. And I hope that we can continue to do more to help mitigate the likelihood of it happening. We may not be able to eradicate it totally, but I feel that if we continue to educate the individuals, especially starting with our young children, teach them the importance of safe dating, teach them the importance of online social interaction, because that's where a lot of them, they're captured really there, because to them it's nothing, no big deal, but they don't know the dangers behind that's lurking, behind those things. So it's very, very important that we continue to educate, and again, start with the little ones, as little as elementary. And again, I know some people say, no, they're too young to know that. No, we need to, because if we don't educate them, the people on the street, they will be the ones to be educating them, and then eventually, if we don't stop it, then they will end up where we are, here at the Bureau of Corrections. So it's critical that we continue to have these conversations, reach out to those youths, make it relatable. Make it relatable so they could understand. We all get together in a room and we talk, theories and everything, but we have to bring those youth and make it relatable so that they could understand. Bring it down to their level so that they could understand the dangers that lurks out there, that to them it may look like, oh, it's nothing harmless. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You old school, you old G, you don't know, mommy. No, I know. So this is what I don't need you to go down that road. Be careful when you're dating someone. There's certain things that you look for. There's certain things that you do, certain way you carry yourself. So it's just critical that we just continue this dialogue. And again, reach out to the youth, starting with the elementary kids, take it into the classroom, perhaps a curriculum, teaching them, different things. So again, thank you all so much for this critical conversation forum. And I hope that we could take it out there again to the classrooms and teach our young folks the importance and how to safeguard themselves or others from being prey to this particular crime. So again, thank you all, and I look forward to continued collaboration with you all so that we could make a better Virgin Islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Testermark, for your comments. Well noted. OG, wait, you got the guy you OG now? You're still young.
You know, my kids, I mean, my oldest child is 37 years old. My youngest is 23. However, you know, they say, Mommy, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, that's what the kids feel. You know, they feel that you're old, you're older, you know. To me, I'm young, but to them, I'm old, you know. But yes, let's continue to educate our young people, start there, and definitely provide the services that's critically needed. We have to have the wraparound services for the individuals. You know, again, here in, at the Bureau of Corrections, as we continue to build and connect individuals, especially dealing with people that's transitioning from the prison, our Transforming Lives Foundation, when we reach out to different entities within the community, there are a lot of things that they say is out there, but when you actually physically look for them, they don't exist. They don't exist. It exists on paper, but reality, it don't exist, which is a big problem for us here in the community. So let's continue to work together to really create those meaningful services that our community desperately needs. So again, thank you all. Y'all stay safe, stay sanitized.
Thank you very much, Director. I'm bouncing it back to Mika Fred and Assistant Attorney General Perry.
So I'm here holding on to our poster because I know Attorney Perry said we need posters and visual markers. I do know ICE, they're gonna come on later. They're gonna phone in. As it was already noted that it had so many cases they're dealing with. So they didn't have time to set up a presentation, but they're calling in. Okay. So I'm holding this poster up and it represents labor trafficking. So the first thing to help human trafficking in your community is education. So I'm gonna educate everybody right now. So when you wanna get your lawn cut or your house retiled or you have something to fix, I know we do have a thing of asking an immigrant worker. I want to let you know, you don't know. I'm not saying the immigrant worker, he might be free and clear, but he could be trafficked by a bigger company or corporation looking for cheap work. So keep that in mind when you're looking for an immigrant worker to cut your grass because you think it's gonna be cheap. You don't know how that person is, who they're living with, how they got here, and what they do to maintain being here. So that's why I'm clutching my my labor trafficking poster. So Attorney Perry to know, like there's some offices, I know Department of Health does have a poster of this in their office. I do have one, and I just bring it to our CYTF so that we can view it, so people can view it. The Blue Campaign, as Dr. Diane wrote about it in the comments. We are part of the Blue Campaign. So I know Dr. V, myself, Dr. McGrath, we have on Blue today to rep human trafficking awareness. So we're in our blue. So just remind everybody that blue is the color for human trafficking awareness, and the Blue Campaign is the national federal campaign against human trafficking. And as I said, I'm not gonna say the number again, but I can. 1-888-373-7888, because I'm gonna be annoying today with this number. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna thank Attorney Perry again for doing a great job. Our feds are gonna call in. Are we going to break, Dr. B, right now, or are we going to take a little break? Because we've been going from 8 o'clock.
And what time is it, Lon?
It's going to 11.
Okay, ask Ms. McGrath, put it back to her, because she's the team lead, was coordinating. What next? We're going to take a break, or we're going to use?
Sure, we can take a little break. Dr. Victor, that's fine.
Okay, let's take like a 5-minute break and then we'll continue with the video.
Well, why don't we do 10 minutes? We'll come back at 11:10.
That sounds
Give
good.
just a little bit of time.
That
All
sounds
right,
great.
so we'll see you back at 11:10. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Stop the video. Okay, let me see. We could press. How did I do it?
Slides saying take a break. Here's Dr. Whitney, here's Genevieve.
You're the techie.
Hi, Senator. How are you?
I can hear you.
Pause the recording. Pause the recording.
Pause the recording.
Okay,
Thank
stop
you.
the recording. Stop the recording.
Hold on, let me just pause this recording.
Thank you, Carlos.
So we're gonna go ahead with our federal agent, resident agent in charge, Mr. Eugene Thomas. But I hope while everybody was getting refreshed from our break that we're ready to go again. Because if you were here for the CYTF meeting, we've been going from 8. So let me respond to resident agent in charge, Thomas. You ready to go? Agent Thomas, we're ready to go. Oh, I'm gonna put a backstory. He also and his staff presented in our conference in 2020 on Valentine's Day over in St. Croix. So yeah, he was along with us too when we started out in the beginning in our second conference that was in St. Croix, because it was okay. We can't keep it always in St. Thomas. I think that we're online, that everybody can be here. I do know we do want to get back on the ground and do a face-to-face in vivo conference again, but since it's Corona, we're online for this year. So resident agent Thomas, you can begin.
Dr. Mika Fred, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Dr. B, you're muted.
We're not hearing you.
I don't know why, because I'm not muted at all. I'm not muted.
We're hearing you, Dr. Victor. We're hearing Dr.
We can hear
Fred,
you loud
but we
and
can't
clear.
hear the other person that's supposed to be talking.
Mika Fred, we could not hear you. Okay.
Okay, I just told
I can hear
our federal agent that he should begin. So
okay, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Is somebody saying something? I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Very well.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. Good afternoon. Well, good morning, rather. This is Eugene Thomas. I'm the resident agent in charge with Homeland Security Investigations, St. Croix office. First of all, let me apologize. We had a search warrant this morning, so I was unable to attend the time that was scheduled on the agenda. But I wanted to say a few words. I'm not prepared to do the PowerPoint presentation today, but I wanted to at least, from a Homeland Security standpoint, give a few words, as this is a very important topic as it relates to Homeland Security investigations. We're pretty much the leader in the global fight against human trafficking, and a lot of times, when I present locally, I tell folks, because a lot of folks say, well, that's not happening in this community. And a lot of times they mistake, the big mistake is that they mistake human smuggling for human trafficking. And that is one of the biggest mistakes, especially when we present to the schools. They think that, it's transportation based rather than exploitation based. And they think that it's not only non-US citizens, can be trafficked, when, we actually arrest US citizens for human trafficking. I can't get into the cases that we have currently, in the district court, because those cases are still ongoing and those investigations are still open. But we do have those cases, and the two, I would say, we investigate over 400 statutes, and the two areas that really make the hair stand up when we deal with the child exploitation cases that we deal with, and we deal with the human trafficking cases. Why? Because in the human trafficking area, we focus, it's victim centered. We deal with a lot of victims in these cases. Kids being exploited, individuals, whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking, tied to the human trafficking realm. These individuals are being exploited, and for whatever reasons, the individuals that are exploiting them, they have a strong hold on the situation. And when we when we approach these victims, a lot of times they literally are afraid of law enforcement. They refuse to speak to law enforcement, and it's that fear that has been ingrained in them, because they're the individuals doing it are very controlling. They don't allow them to speak to anyone. A lot of times drugs is involved. They don't allow them near to any certain groups or individuals. So a lot of time, all that fear, it builds up, and it causes them to have serious refusal to speak to law enforcement. Sometimes, most times, we have to bring in our forensics interview specialists, and we have them throughout the nation. Our forensics interview specialists are trained. They travel all around the world dealing with these cases, not only in the U.S. They travel to our international offices to assist our international offices with the cases, because they have that background. They definitely know how to communicate with victims, and we bring in our victim assistance program, and they work under the victim assistance program. So we pride ourselves in Homeland Security investigations on being the leaders in this area. And the Blue campaign has helped us immensely, in targeting, outreach and going into the schools and going into different environments to make the awareness known that this is, it is happening. We always talk about the 3 P's, prevention, protection, and prosecution, because at the end of the day, we really want to prosecute these individuals who are carrying out these heinous acts and these crimes against the victims that we encounter. And we like to add the 4th P, which is partnerships with state and local, partnership within NGOs, because the partnerships that we form are, they go a long way, and we can't do it without, the partnerships that we have with the state and local organizations and also the NGOs. So kudos to all you guys that are listening, because you guys play a major part, in this, having one voice, one mission, and ending human trafficking. I definitely can speak to just in seeing the victims that we've encountered. I see that they're slow. It takes a while for them to actually come around, but when they do, that helps our cases, immensely, because who better than those individuals to state what actually happened to them. One of the things that we also highlight is a lot of this is happening in plain sight. A lot of we call it hidden in plain sight. A lot of times, these victims are before us, and they're hidden in plain sight. It's happening to them, and a lot of times we don't see it, but that's where the education comes in. That's where these seminars and outreach come in, because then folks can recognize that some of these things are actually happening in our community. And I can't stress more that every time we speak, we always get the question, is this really happening in our community? And it is. It truly does happen in our community. And, especially when you deal with, sex trafficking, and we like to highlight that, for forced fraud or coercion, if that person is under 18, that's a serious crime. Definitely, we've prosecuted individuals for that, and a lot of times it's individuals who know the victims very well. Sometimes their girlfriend, it's their girlfriend or significant other, and they're actually pawning this individual off, for sex. So it does happen in our community, and we take it very seriously. We definitely also promote our tip line. For those of you who are not fully aware of our tip line, the easy way to remember is we say 1-866 DHS for Department of Homeland Security, the number 2, and ICE, ICE for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Okay, so with that said, I'd like to say thanks to Dr. Fred for keeping us in mind, for always inviting us to present. We take this again seriously. We pride ourselves on being the leaders in the fight against human trafficking, and we also like to promote our Blue campaign, because the Blue campaign, again, that's the agency's brand when it comes to the fight against human trafficking. So thank you again, Dr. Fred. Thank you to the listening audience. I apologize again for, not being able to present earlier, but we look forward to when we can get out of this, COVID environment, and we can present in person again. It definitely goes a long way when, we can present face to face and get the word out there and can discuss, some of the things that we actually we see in our profession on the federal side, and we work closely with the locals as well too. So local law enforcement, as well as all the NGOs and the state and local government agencies. So thanks again, Dr. Fred, and look forward to the continued support and presentations in the future.
Thank you, Resident Agent in Charge Thomas. As I said, he was there. I called him up. He didn't say no. So I said, let's get the Crujan in because it's a cultural thing. So we're making sure that all our islands are representative. And as I said, he didn't say no when we did our in-person last year in 2020. So we thank ICE again for all your help. Thank you, Resident Agent in Charge Thomas.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm eligible for retirement next year, so I don't know, how much longer I'll be doing this, but it'll be my 23rd year in federal law enforcement. Hopefully, I have another 2 in me, but we'll see.
Okay, we need to repeat the numbers again. Rosie Francis have a little message saying, could you please repeat that number again for the team? And then Nika Fred will put it in the little listing area.
Okay, and that number is 1-866, the letters DHS, the number 2, and ICE for ICE.
Oh, ICE, okay.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, our cultural competency over here in St. Thomas, is that B as in boy or V as in Victor? We're sorry over here, we're sorry.
No, that's actually, I think it's, okay, I'm gonna give you the full number. It's 1-866-347-2423.
Okay.
My easy way of remembering it is the 1-866 DHS, the number 2 and ICE, but the number is again 1-866-347-2423, and that's the human trafficking tip line.
Okay. Well, thank you again, ICE, for doing what you do well and continue to. You got 2 more years in you, so stretch it out to 2 more years. We need you on the ground during them. So we need to do that work.
Well,
and more important of all, mentor someone to replace you. Mentor a young person that's interested in human trafficking and protecting the world.
Well, it's called succession planning. So we have a lot of individuals fully able and ready to go.
Okay.
If I leave, they're definitely well prepared.
Okay, sounds good.
One more minute, Agent Thomas. Does anybody have any questions for Agent Thomas?
The question I have is, Agent Thomas, is it hard to do what you do because of the culture of the Virgin Islands? The culture, because our presentation is focusing on trafficking and prevention awareness, but how does culture impact what you do?
How culture, I think, impacts what you do is because we live in such a small community that a lot of times we know the individuals that we arrest. And a lot of times, sometimes in this small community, some of those individuals may be family members. Of course, that doesn't affect us, carrying out our duties. But being in such a small community, you pretty much know a lot of times the individuals that you put handcuffs on. In the States now, you work in Georgia, you may never ever see that person, in Virginia or California. You may never ever see that person or know that person that you arrest, but not in our community, and that's a lot of time. It's hard seeing, your own fellow Virgin Islanders or individuals that that may be, guilty of, carrying out these offenses.
Yes. Okay, thank you again for sharing.
You're welcome.
Mika Frack, back to you.
So we have to think about who we have I was about to say billion, but we have a couple thousand of caves and small islets in the VI. And just to bring that attention, who owns these little tiny properties that surround us in the VI? Is the little islands and caves, are they getting policed? Is somebody watching for them? Or are we like, okay, they're rich enough, you let them do what they're doing over there? So that's basically my inner question about how things happen and we don't know. Not that we couldn't find out, but we haven't thrown an eye on it from the get-go. That's one of the questions we should propose any place, especially in the VI, to our legislatures, to our government, to our federal government. Okay, we have all these little islands and caves that have owners. Do we really know what's going on? And I think it's mostly of, okay, if you're rich enough to buy your own private island, they want to be private. Let's not police those islands because they want their privacy. But then it's like, you can't be surprised of what's going on those little islands because that person was rich enough to buy it. So we're gonna jump to a video next. Thank you again, Resident Agent Thomas, for participating.
Yes.
And we're ready to get back to in person. I think there's a type of dynamic when the presenters are in front of us. So we're gonna go ahead to a video right now, and then we're gonna jump into our cultural part of this conversation. So Dr. Victor, please introduce the first video.
The video, I think, that's being played, it just gives the faces of what human trafficking looks like, if that's the video that Dr. McGrath is showing. The faces of human trafficking, that's what it's supposed to be called. Did you see did she show it? Okay, let's see. See what it says.
My trafficker was my husband. There was no way I could reach out to anybody for help.
We're scared. We're scared to run. We're scared to tell anybody what's going on.
It was an incredibly violent situation. I felt like there was no way I could get out.
Human traffickers can be just about anyone from any walk of life. A lot of the trafficking involves domestic servitude, hoteliers, restaurant owners, owners of massage parlors, agricultural farm owners.
There can be a trafficker who tells a woman, I want to be your boyfriend, I love you, and if you love me, you're going to go out and have sex for money. It can be kind of psychological like that, or it can be more overt and more physical. It can be hitting, abusing, keeping them away from any support systems.
Trafficking, it doesn't know any boundaries. The victim can be male, female, transgendered, anyone. and it happens all over America.
I still see this attitude of it's just immigrants or it's just people in other countries. It happens to US citizens so much more than people are aware.
The natural stakeholders in this issue are certainly law enforcement, legal advocates, social service providers. There's other players involved as well.
It is important to engage the community because victims often don't self-identify. They don't come forward to law enforcement.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Citizens in the community are the eyes and the ears.
It's medical workers, it's educators, it's personnel at homeless shelters.
We can't do this alone. No one has the capacity to provide every single thing that a victim or survivor of human trafficking needs.
There has to be a support system within the community, psychological counseling, shelter, and vocational education so they can reintegrate, become a healthy individual.
There's an intentional effort to get everyone together so we know how to share resources, we know how to work together, and to make sure at the end of the day, a victim becomes a survivor.
Okay, so this wonderful video shows the faces of human trafficking and shows the importance of collaboration with all entities in a community. Passing the torch back to Dr. Mika Fred.
So I think I shown the beginning of that video where we did our presentation in St. Croix. I just want everybody to know and keep on reminding yourself. I said it bluntly last time when we worked with VIAG for our Facebook TV shows. Everybody has a price tag. Everybody has a price. If you could be captured or seduced and coerced, somebody will buy you. You might be like even me. I'm like, okay, I'm not the slimmest girl in the world, but somebody might have a big girl fetish. Somebody might have a blonde hair fetish. Somebody might have a short girl fetish. Somebody might have a petite woman fetish. And even we don't skip over males as well who can be trafficked. I want to leave everybody to go home with everybody has a price tag on them to a human trafficker. It doesn't matter the physical characteristics. We've read about disabled children being trafficked by their parents. So it doesn't matter to a trafficker. You're a $, you're a price tag. So I always like to reiterate, just like the victim's number I've been saying, 1-888-373-78888. Know it now. Everybody has a price tag. And please be mindful of how you're engaging in human trafficking in the VI. Yes, you want your long cut on your galvanized on your roof, but you don't know where the person that's participating in. So we're gonna go now to our cultural part with our cultural persons, Miss Sonia Jacobs Dow from the Landmark Society. Please begin your presentation.
Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Sonia Jacobs Dow.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Victor. And thanks to all of you, those who invited me, those who are here participating with us. And I don't know what's happening with my video. I'll try to fix it as I go along, but just want to give thanks for this day and this opportunity. And to say, you know, it's always very interesting to me how what we plan or what we think we're planning, if we put ourselves in the right space, can coincide with what is ordained for us to do. So I looked again at the outline that I prepared when I was first asked by Dr. Fred and then by Dr. Victor, and I know they worked in concert, but when I was first asked by them to participate in this conference, and so much of what was put in my mind at the beginning coincides with my reflections on today's presentations, and trying to look at human trafficking through the lens of culture, and you can't look through the lens of culture without looking through the lens of our history. So I just wanted to say, first off, that although we tend to romanticize the structures that, such as the ones that can be seen behind me, and I'll shift so that you can see them a little better. We tend to romanticize those structures, and they do have a place in our history and our culture. And there is an opportunity to find beauty in them in spite of the horrendous purpose for which they were erected. And that beauty is in knowing that our ancestors constructed them, that our ancestors put up structures that come and go, centuries come and go, hurricanes and earthquakes and everything else can still be standing. And the fact that they did this while they were the victims of human trafficking. So that even in that horror, their talent was not erased. I'm certain that with very few exceptions, all of those participating today are descendants, have ancestors who were trafficked both for forced human labor and for sexual exploitation and servitude. Our ancestors in this territory were the first victims of human trafficking. And that is something that should always be present in our minds. Not that we live in anger or wanting retribution for that horror, but that it inform us, both the horror and their ability to survive it and to do things to protect and defend their families. That needs to reside always in our consciousness. Because if it doesn't, then we make ourselves vulnerable to unwittingly participating in activities that can harbor human trafficking. And none of us wants to think of ourselves in that way. We don't want to think that we having come out of such horror, can play a role in the continuation and the current forms of human trafficking. And so our speakers so far have dealt with law, they've dealt with the history of law, with some of the cultural reasons that make it difficult to prosecute and help victims to come out of human trafficking. We've heard about what various government agencies, both local and federal, are doing to prevent and then to prosecute perpetrators of human trafficking. And we've heard how we've changed from looking at people who have been trafficked as the perpetrators, and how they're now seen as victims, and what our practices are in terms of prosecution of those people. So I don't have to spend a lot of time of that. We've talked on definitions and all of that, and I've learned a tremendous amount. But what I do want to draw your attention to and ask for your conscious participation in is it may cause me to make you a bit uncomfortable. And while I cannot ask your forgiveness for that, I don't want to leave you in the discomfort. What I want us to do is to become uncomfortable enough that it makes us comfortable and consciously committed to holding space, creating and maintaining and holding space that allows our children, our youth, and vulnerable adults to have a place, a safe space, or what I've always called with my own child, a soft landing spot. Because each of us, from children all the way through our elders, need a soft landing spot. We need a spot where we are heard, where there are attempts to understand us, where we are given support and encouragement and protection. And that's what I want us all to commit to. And it starts with some things that we may have missed. And it starts sometimes under an excuse, and that's what I consider it, that says this is our culture. Culture is something that evolves over time, and it speaks to our shared values and the shared norms that come out of our shared experience. And so we have to be very careful about what we label as culture. And I wish that some other people were present here today, but I think we can all take this message out. We need to question, even challenge, the images that we use, we being our government agencies, as well as individual organizations and individuals within our community. The images that we use when we sponsor or promote events that we give the label of being cultural. So when we promote images of half-naked people, sometimes not even half, right? More than half-naked people, purporting to celebrate. But what it seems that they're celebrating, and I want to borrow a term that Attorney Perry used that I thought was so important, and I took it as a confirmation and affirmation that I was headed in the right direction. And it was, and now that I want to use it, I'm going to lose it, but it was the public sexual performances. I don't think those were his exact words, but that is what it meant to me. These public sexual performances that we often applaud, that when they are critiqued, we say that's our culture, or we say adults have a right to express themselves. And we're all adult enough to understand that my individual right stops when it begins to harm you or your rights, or when it begins to harm our community's values and norms, and when it fails to protect the most vulnerable in our community. So while as adults, we might think it's okay to have sexual performances that have changed so much in my lifetime. I'm 60 years old, and I have seen our cultural festivals and other occasions change so drastically, particularly in the last 20, 25 years, that I don't recognize them as the culture with which I grew up. We have gone from designing costumes that actually dressed our bodies and music that actually celebrated our culture and dance routines that again celebrated our culture, to now simply saying, put on the skimpiest outfit that you can. And if you look at our troops in our parades, the only thing that tends to distinguish them is the color of the fabric or the color of the feathers. We've now come to accept that wearing the least amount and then having routines, I'll put that in quotes, that only, really the only thing that separates them from recognizable sexual activity is that people are not in horizontal positions. And we now call that culture. I'm telling you this because as we talk about protecting our children, we have to be very cognizant about what we project to our children. What we say to them is important, valuable, and acceptable behavior. When we say to them that being out in public half naked, pretending to have sex, is something that we applaud, then it's very, very difficult to say to those same children, and I'm talking from the tiniest tots, to our teenagers who are flexing their independence. It's very difficult to them to say, it's not okay to be paid to do this. It's not okay to accept, whether it's money or praise, to engage in these behaviors. It's not okay to post photographs of yourself in these ways on every social media portal that exists. It's very difficult to say to them, and yet, if we don't, we are creating the culture and the environment that makes them so vulnerable and so easy for them to be trafficked. Because trafficking doesn't seem like trafficking. It seems like the norm. The behavior that they might be forced into might be their norm by the time they get into that situation. So I'm speaking about this because I want us not just to focus on the laws and who's the perpetrator and who's the victim and how the court system, the legal system processes them. I want us to focus on our personal responsibility in terms of the cultural environment that we are creating that can make people think that we believe this is okay. And I'm challenging us. I'm challenging every one of us. I have situations in my own family where I am trying to find the words, the opportunity, the environment in which I can sit and have conversations with young family members who have been raised from the time they were little to accept quote unquote sexy outfits. Tell me what we're saying to a child when we dress them in what adults think are outfits that make them sexy. What are we saying to children from the time they're toddlers about how we value them in this community? If their role is to help someone else to satisfy their needs, to see them in a sexualized role, we have to be careful and we have to be mindful, because our every thought, our every word, and our every deed carries with it a cost, for a potential cost for our community. So I'm asking you to take on personal responsibility. I'm asking you to ask yourself, what is my attitude towards sex and sexuality? What do I say to my own children, to the other young people that are in my circle of influence, whether it's through my family, through my work, through friendships, through whatever venue it is? And what steps do I take to ensure that what I say is my attitude towards sex and sexuality is reflected in the actions that I take and the opportunities that I create for that safe space for those children? This may sound like I'm putting a lot of pressure on us as adults, and that is my intention. Because I think that too often we sit back, we let things pass. Sometimes we're active in it. Sometimes we applaud that little child standing on the side of the parade route who is imitating the walking up of the adults that passing them, or the older children, because we don't prevent that kind of walking up in our children's parade anymore. It used to be that we had a standard, and a school principal or an organizational leader would state that standard and take quick action to remove anyone who was not performing in that parade up to that standard. So if we let the little 2-year-old watch the older kids and the adults, we take them to these parades and they start walking up, and to us it's funny. To us it's something to applaud, to photograph, to post on Facebook, to post on other media, to show to our family and friends, and it becomes all a big joke. We're contributing to the culture that makes our children vulnerable and creates an opportunity for human trafficking. Not the kind that brings people across waters, not the obvious kinds that we've discussed today, but we're creating a culture that increases the vulnerability of our little children and of our young people in high school who don't even understand how hormones work on our own bodies, as I didn't as a teenager. Nobody spoke to me about that. I didn't know what hormones were doing to my body. I didn't know that hormones could create a reaction in me. I didn't know that. I didn't know the role of fragrances. I didn't know the role of music. I didn't know the role of visual images that can all be very innocent, but when paired together, make our young people very vulnerable because they don't understand. They know what they feel, but they don't know why they're feeling it. And so when they're in a position, in a situation where they're vulnerable, they don't always have the tools to react. And I think we owe them that. We owe them these conversations, these discussions. We owe them something that I didn't invent, but we owe them that code where a child who finds themselves in a situation that makes them uncomfortable can just text the letter X to a parent or a trusted adult who then can immediately call them and say, listen, there's an emergency at home. I need to come get you. And that gives that child a way out of that situation without having to risk anything with their peers. And in our case, without having to explain what happened, except that they felt vulnerable, he or she felt vulnerable and knew they thought they were in above their heads and needed help getting out. And that can be any number of situations. But it's a way of creating that safe space for children. Imagine now when those high schoolers graduate and they go off to college where they're considered adults. There is so much so-called freedom and so many situations that are new to them, which all can contribute to vulnerability. But you're not just 20 minutes away to rescue them. We have to give them tools. We have to start very young and give them safe spaces and tools that they can use. We have to remember the way in which our ancestors were exploited. We talk a lot about the forced labor that our ancestors went through in the period of enslavement, but we don't talk enough about how unprotected men and women and children were from sexual exploitation. I'm a family history researcher, and I've seen many times where someone researching an ancestor who was enslaved in a relationship with someone of European descent who was free will create a romantic story around a record that simply only says that ancestor had children with this person. That's the only thing the record can tell us. But they will create this romantic story about how they must have found true love, a story that we can't prove or disprove. So I'm always cautious with people about creating those romantic stories. I have those relationships in my own family history, but I can't romanticize them and I can't pass on that romantic story to younger people because they have to recognize that in that period, our ancestors were in a position where neither men nor women could defend themselves against sexual exploitation. It wasn't just the women who were raped. It didn't just happen in the slave quarters. It happened in the fields. It happened in situations like we hear about today, where a so-called medical practitioner assigned to that plantation or working on that plantation was part of that exploitation. An overseer, where sometimes people were forced to engage in sexual activity for the satisfaction of these urges of others to watch them and sometimes participate. We have to keep that present in our conscience and look for ways that our young people and our vulnerable adults can be exploited today, and how can we help prevent, and sadly, in those cases when it happens, respond to that as human beings, as individuals, because it's not everybody who you're going to be able to refer immediately to an agency. They need something from us. They need compassion from us. They need protection from us. They need vigilance from us. That's our culture. That is what is our culture. The courage and the compassion and the understanding and the willingness to stand up for each other, the willingness to say this is not an activity, a situation in which a child should be present. This is not an activity that I want at my house, in my festival troupe, in my party, in my workspace, in my tramp. Remember when a tramp was such a safe experience that your parents would let teenagers go out of the house in the 4-day morning to participate in a tramp? You didn't have to worry about nobody touching you, walking up on you, or worse. That is our culture. That is our culture. Not what we're seeing today. And if we want to claim that as our culture and live as if that's our culture, then we each have a responsibility, a personal responsibility to do that. Are you having, do you purchase or accept gifts, as I described before, that make our little children, usually our little girls, look sexy? Are you consciously doing this? How do you respond when a gift is offered? And you may not want to insult the giver, but you also don't have to dress your child in it, because you have rights. You have freedom. We like to talk about freedom and rights. Well, let's talk about the freedom and rights to be responsible. Right? What messages are we as a community sending, and how can we begin to change them? Who is saying to our revered Department of Tourism, no, walking up isn't the image that we want to present to the world? No, a half-naked woman or man is not the image we want to present to the world. Who is saying to our carnival and festival committees, troops, music, and routines that don't respect and reflect true Virgin Islands culture should not be eligible for the awards? They shouldn't be. A song that is about nothing other than walking up, how could that be the road march? And I use the word song lightly, because what is passing for music is usually nothing more than a beat and somebody repeating phrases about sex and sexuality. Who's talking? You know somebody, I know somebody on the committee. How many of us are taking the responsibility of speaking to it so that what we present to our children and to the broader world is what we really value? I've seen sometimes on Facebook the reactions of people outside of the territory to videos that go up during our festival celebrations and our carnival. The way they perceive us is not the way I think we want to be perceived. And there may be exceptions. I may be insulting some people who are participating today, but I'm going to challenge you as to what is culture. Culture don't change overnight. And culture is about our collective. Don't tell me about the benefits of tourism, because every island in the Caribbean has a parade similar to what we have now developed. We ain't standing out. We're not drawing more visitors because we have emulated things that are different from our culture. I know. I work at a place that hosts these visitors. I can tell you the numbers. I can tell you the numbers for other venues. We're not drawing a greater share of visitors. We're not distinguishing ourselves and our culture. And what we live, what we believe, what we support can either make this a place where human trafficking cannot thrive, or it can make it one where it does. So that's my challenge to you today. And the term that Attorney Perry used before was sexually explicit performances. And I wonder, when he said that, I thought to myself, how many of our friends and neighbors who participate in these sexually explicit performances during a parade would be insulted if we said to them, what you're doing is not a whole lot different than what goes on in a strip club? How many of them would be horrified that we thought of it in that way? We need to ask them. I'm not asking you to go into an aggressive confrontation. I'm asking you to have a conversation with the people that you love, the people you work with, the people you live with, the people you socialize with, the people you join festival troops with. Because that's one of the most visible images of us, right? And we owe this. We owe this to our ancestors who didn't have a choice. We have so much choice now that we choose to forget what our ancestors went through and what we owe them. Before I get off my soapbox, there are a couple other things that might feel less uncomfortable, that you may feel less uncomfortable in doing. So I don't want to leave you with just all the hard work. Make sure, beyond COVID, but even during COVID, that your home is a place that is safe and open to your children's friends. From your little toddlers, all the way up to your teenagers and your college students and your young adults. Make your space a safe space for them and their families. I helped to raise a niece, and my attitude with her was, I want to know who your friends are. I want to know who you hang with in school. I want to know who calls you on the phone. I want to know what you guys talk about. And I'm sure I didn't get all the reports, but we knew who her friends were. And we wanted them to understand that she was not alone in the world, that she was part of a family that had values that included her safety and her success. And I want to ask you, if you're not already doing it, create that safe space in your home and around you. Children know you can let them know who they can be safe around. Bring their families in too, because you want to know who they are. And you want them to know who you are. That's about creating safe spaces. And this, of course, goes beyond you. I'm not just preaching at those of us who are here, but the people with whom you interact professionally and personally. Encourage this behavior that we have these safe spaces. Sometimes at work, somebody will come in, a visitor, and refer to me as Auntie Sonia. And I remember a coworker saying, how he's your nephew? Why he calls you Auntie Sonia? And I said, because he was a friend of my niece who lived with me. And so I became Auntie Sonia to her whole circle of friends. And today, I'm always so grateful for that opportunity that we had to be a positive influence for them and to create a safe space. And I want that to be so broad in this community that there is no child amongst us that doesn't have a safe place. No child that can't have somebody they could call when that older guy shows interest in them, girl or boy. And I'm 60, but I'm telling you, I didn't see it at the time. But reflecting, I realized that when I was 13 and 14 and 15 and 16, there were guys 10 years older than me that were showing interest, and I was not equipped to deal with that. God takes care of children and fools. But part of the way that he takes care of them is by putting adults around them that will take care of them. I've had 5th and 6th graders pose questions that I had to confess to them were making my jaw drop. But asking me, why am I only attracted to boys 25 and 26? Imagine a 5th or 6th grader telling you that. Because that 5th and 6th grader has hormones that are beginning to express themselves, but they also may have a vulnerability that responds to the attention and the quote unquote love that is being offered to them. So they don't have all that they need to respond in a situation like that. We need to be willing to have conversations with them. I remember the conversation that happened in that situation. And I remember taking the time for that group of girls to form a circle and hold hands and share and recognize the energy that passed around that circle. The positive energy that can be a part of a circle of friends, particularly when it includes some responsible adults. And we have, that's not a formal rite of passage in our community, but in your family, you need to create rites of passage. Don't leave it for our young people to learn from videos and YouTube and movies and first-time experiences. Give them the benefit of your knowledge in a way that is not judgmental, in a way that leaves the door open for them to come back, because that's how we will maintain a culture that makes it difficult for human traffickers to succeed. Right? Dr. Victor, I paid no attention to what time I started. I have a feeling I passed my 30 minutes.
It's okay.
I just really, this is something I'm very passionate about. And I just want us to recommit to these young people in our lives and in our community and to the adults, because there are adults who were raised in situations where they didn't have a safe space. They didn't have a soft spot to land. And I really think as professionals, as individuals, many of us as spiritual people, we have a responsibility to them. And I hope that somehow I have assisted you with this charge that That's the charge I give to myself in front of the mirror. That I'm now saying to all of you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I thank you, Sonia. I never know what I'm gonna hear, but I can tell you, I wrote my notes down, and you're correct when you say people think, what is culture? Because we think about our culture all the time. Even within our different spaces where we work or we play, there's a culture there. And so you're correct. What are the values we have? What are the norms? And what we have to take responsibilities. When we see things that are not what it's supposed to be, we call it out. We don't perpetrate and allow our behavior, because we want to get along and be liked and all these things, but we're creating a quote unquote culture that is not based on what our traditional Caribbean culture is. So it makes us have to step back and see what we value. So I thank you again. This workshop is videotaped and will be sent out to all the team members who registered for this workshop. So they get to hear you again, because what you're saying is important for us to step back and look in different areas, whether it's tourism, education, health, spirituality. We all have a responsibility. And I thank you again for your remarks. Dr. Mika Fred, I'm passing it back to you.
Well, thank you again. I'm now, I feel like now I could say Auntie Sonia. Jacobs now. And
Auntie Sonia.
That's a strong part of the cultural component to help stop human trafficking. All the aunties in our community that we used to look out for each other's children and protect each other's children. So Auntie Sonia, thank you very much for presenting in the presentation. So I think we're gonna do a next little clip, and then we're gonna.
Question, is Liba Olini still there?
Okay, let's look. I can look.
I'm looking at it.
Yes, he's still there.
So we need to move forward with him because we're running out of time. And we have
to. All right. So I'm gonna present now Mr. Liba Olini, an educator. He has been part of the rites of passage Auntie Sonia was talking about, and it was a program under Family Resource Center. I know me, Dr. Victor, Mr. Olini, we participated to help raise and protect our young men in our community. So, Mr. Olini, the floor is yours.
Is he there? Is he hearing?
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. I turn on my camera, but it ain't coming out.
Okay, okay.
But you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my camera ain't coming. I don't know why.
Okay.
Anyway, good afternoon to the esteemed people who participate in this conference. Give thanks to Dr. Victor and Dr. Fred for giving me the opportunity. This is the second time I've been able to participate in certain gathering like this virtually. And it's a pleasure to come and share my knowledge and practices of the necessity for us to understand our history and culture, and how can we best apply the positive characteristic of our culture to address and solve social injustice and the human and sex trafficking that affect our children, youth, and family. Even though
Mr. Liba? Something happened. I don't know what happened.
Okay, while Mr. Olinibi gets his audio back, I will share, when me and Dr. Victor and CYTF decided to pursue human trafficking, I said, well, if we're going to speak to an audience, any audience, we have to be educated in human trafficking. So at the time, we decided to get certified with the Arizona State Trauma Institute. And I will play back one of the vignettes that we had in our class. It was a human trafficker went to high school and he offered a young lady, you could get an iPhone 12. And she got excited. She's like, what I have to do? And the trafficker was like, oh, a small errand. I just need you for a small errand. And of course, it was to have sex for money. And I guess that they didn't go into the details, but she complied with the trafficker. And she got her iPhone 12. Or what it was, the 10 at the time, I think it's a year or two back. So she brought the iPhone 10 or 12, whatever the newest iPhone was at the time, to school. And of course, she got questions of, wow, where did you get such an expensive phone? And she stated, you know, you can get an iPhone 10 or 12. All you gotta do is talk to this man and he'll set you up. So I'm just displaying how quickly a trafficker got nearly a whole grade of kids, high school girls, to do his dirty deed. And it was quickly because they wanted that iPhone. They wanted that brand new iPhone. And the trafficker wanted his commodity. And how quickly it happened. And at the end of the day, he used to take the kids, it was during the school day, they left school, I guess during the time of school, and at the end of the day, I guess before 3, he would take them right back to campus, the set of girls right back to campus. So I'm saying that we know, and money, poverty is a factor. I think that read the last statistic, they said half of the VI population is on that poverty line. And the other half is doing well. So when you're looking for money and resources, your kids, you yourself, the adult, might look to end up in being trafficked. It's very easy to coerce a person who's looking and need money. And they're looking to survive. And a lot of the 2 cases that we saw before our headlines, they were told, come to the USVI, you'll make some money. The person will tell you, I know the second case at the guest house, it was to work as a bartender, as a server, and they end up in prostitution and being trafficked. The trafficker, and they're like, oh, why they just don't leave? The trafficker had a fee just to leave the premises. And the trafficker threatened the people, the young ladies at the guest house, if you leave, X, Y, and Z is gonna happen to you. And she took they usually take documents, she took their documents, their passports as well. So as I was saying, it's quite hard to get out of that debt bondage, because there was a debt bondage. The trafficker told them that they have to pay back for the plane travel and the stay of being in a guest house. So you can never pay back a debt bondage. You can't. The trafficker will be like, oh, well, you ate an apple. So you have to sleep with 3 more clients for that apple. So you can never people can never get themselves out of debt bondage. So I feel that, Dr. Victor and CYTF, just learning about human trafficking on our end, it was a long cycle, because we said we wanted to know what's going on. We want to be informed. We want to be educated. And, you know, it's force, fraud, or coercion. We also had a next example of a young lady from India that came over to the US, and it was her trafficker. Well, they promised her to marry her. The guy promised to marry her. And this is a labor bondage situation. And what happened, she ended up having to be the housemaid and of the family unit. And it was a large family. She had to cook, clean, wash for the whole entire family, not just the immediate family, everybody else, because she got the promise. There's always a promise of being an engineer in the US. So we can only say, and that's just a smaller situation, that one, of how somebody got exploited under a promise of education. There's always, people are always looking for either money, some other opportunity they can get. Some people get exploited for US citizenship. So we always have to be on the lookout of human trafficking and exploitation. So
this is Dr. Victor. Okay, one second. Somebody's trying to get back in. Let me see if it's Lee Bolini. Somehow he got kicked off.
Okay.
Got kicked off. So I told him I was going to send him the link again, and then hopefully that's him, because he was having problems getting on. So I'm sending him the call-in number, because he said
he should be back on. He should be back on.
Yeah, because he said he got bounced off. I don't know why.
I don't know why neither. He should be back on. Dr. McGrath said she just let him back in.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Oh, I was back now.
Yeah, I don't know what went down, but I was suddenly cut off. Okay, well, to continue my line of thought, those of us.
Mr. Olani, please adjust your camera. Adjust your camera. I'm seeing your hair.
Oh, you see me here?
Yes.
Yes. Like again, good afternoon to one and all. I'd like to make my humble contribution. I think it's very important that I'm trying to adhere by deal with another aspect of culture and those things. I'm trying to suggest that we deal with the positive aspect and use whatever positive aspect of culture to address some of the issues our youth, children, and the family are facing. And these are some of my suggestions based on my study of history and culture. And when we, it's very important that we know African, Caribbean, and Virgin history. All three history is very important that we know. And there's several areas I like to focus on that we can utilize for culture as a positive vehicle to address human trafficking and so forth, and any social injustice that is meted out to our children, youth, and the family. In one of our great Pan-Africanist Virginia hero by the name of Edward Winmer Blyden wrote a very interesting book, our pamphlet in 1908 called African Life and Custom. He was focusing on the characteristic of African culture. And he mentioned 4 things in the book that I may quote for you all to understand when we're going to talk about culture. Because our ancestors, before they came here, they had culture. And when they came here, they had culture too. But we have to understand what have been maintained, what has been modified, and what has been lost due to the oppression and exploitation of slavery and colonialism. And in his book, African Life and Custom, he mentioned 4 basic things of part of our culture. And I quote him from his book. He said the family, which is in Africa as elsewhere, is the basic unit of society. We have to make sure before we came here and in the Western Hemisphere and during slavery, after slavery, the family was one of the most important institutions that help us to survive those traumatic experience of slavery and colonialism. And this is what he said about the family. I just quoting something that our family needs to be solving the same tradition like that in Africa once upon a time. And let's see what he mentioned about the family, the importance of family. He said, having endeavored to describe the basic unit of African society, the family, and to show how this organized and the effect of this organization upon life, the vitality and perpetuity of the population, we now proceed to point out as far as we can be done in the column of newspaper, how the African, who's our ancestors, has provided for the employment, the energy, and support of this population from the day of birth to the day of death. So that under the African system, there is no widespread pamperism, no cold submerged tent, no waste product. In other words, our family were able to take care of us from cradle to grave. And you can see over the years the breakdown of that family and some of the family, not all the family, some of the family, and whereby our children are experiencing homelessness, unemployment, poverty, and those type of things that can lead them to become victim of human trafficking. So it's very important to me in this time and any other time that we have policies, program, and projects that will strengthen and support the extended family of our family. And in this time we have single family, but still they must be part of the network whereby we can have the family as a basic of protection for our children and youth in this society. Another aspect of our African culture I brought much urge y'all is that we need to change our value system, the present value system that we have. And our ancestors were able to at least a minimum of 7 values that Professor Ranko was able to study in the different traditional African society throughout the African continent. And you can see some of these values that we need to be in the Virgin Islands and elsewhere. The first value is unity, Umoja, as Kiswahili. We need to strive for and maintain unity within the family, community, nation, and race. Second value is Koji Chagalia, means self-determination, to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, speak for ourselves, instead of being defined, named, created for, and spoken for by others. Third principle of value, Ujima, collective work and responsibility. And I love this one here. It said to build and maintain our community together and to make our sisters and brothers' problem our problem and to solve them together. You know, looking out for each other. Ujama, cooperative economic, to build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other business together to profit from them together. And by owning our own stores and businesses, we can employ our youth who need employment. Nia, purpose, to make our collective vocation the building and developing our community in order to restore our community to their traditional greatness. Uumba, creativity, to do always as much as we can in a way that we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than when we inherit it. And Imani, the last principle, to believe with all our heart in our parents, in our creator, teacher, leader, and people in the righteousness and victory of our struggle. These are some of the minimum value that our ancestors left for us. That's minimum, the minimum, so a minimum of 7 value in which we can use as a guide in human relationship, building good relationship among ourselves and among different people. And the reason why we stress knowing our history, because if you don't know yourself, you'll be get kicked off the shelf at one DJ, sing one upon a time. It's very important that our youth, our children know their history, because if they don't know themselves, how can they understand other people? If they don't love themselves, how can they love other people? If they don't respect themselves, how can they respect others? And so it's crucial that we include our history and culture to be taught to our children and youth, so they have a foundation of self, knowing a knowledge of self, and know their responsibility to that of their society and community. And they must make a positive contribution to the development of our people. Another area I would like to look at is the type of philosophy. Our philosophy has changed over the years, you know, and in Africa, the type of philosophy we had, one of them were called the Mbutu. Mbutu is a Zulu or Xhosa word, and it simply means it's a traditional African concept, roughly translated mean humanity toward others. It embodies all those virtues that maintain harmony and the spirit of sharing among members of a society. And it implies an appreciation of traditional beliefs and constant awareness that an individual action today are a reflection on the past and will have far-reaching consequences for the future. The philosopher Mbutu have values such as respect for others, helpfulness, community, sharing, caring, trust, and unselfishness. These are some of the philosophies, even though we're practiced in Africa, but during slavery, after slavery, and still to a certain extent up to today, in some families, some community, we do reflect some of those values. And we need to embrace this type of values, this type of philosophy that will elevate us to a better situation which we face. And key to this whole thing is empowerment to me when you want to address the issue of human trafficking. Not only that we want to provide education for our youth and children, but for especially the youth and young people, we must have them empowered too. We can give them all the positive ideas and things, but we must make sure we give them the education that they need to know themselves, the skill that they need to contribute to community and to the territory, and the value that they need to have so that they can use that as a guide in life. So education is a very important thing to enlighten and bring up awareness, but we must also empower our youth. I agree with the previous speaker, Sonia Dow, that we need to create a space, public and private space, in which our youth can express their culture, their views, their comment, their creativity, their gift, and where they can perform in sport and recreation. They need to be given the opportunity in which they can have gainful employment, living wage and higher, living a higher wage based on the skill that they have. But again, that's due to education. They must have the education. Or youth, especially young people, must have the opportunity to own the small businesses or cooperative in which they can earn a livelihood. So to me, those are examples of empowerment that we need to do, because when I read the article, especially written by Dr. Victor, you see some of the problems that the victim of human trafficking experiences, that either they're unemployed, living in poverty, homelessness, you know, those type of things is social or economic issues, and those things need to be addressed. But also part of solving that particular issue, we as a society need to have a social or critical analysis of the type of society in which we live in to really come to the roots of those symptoms. These are symptoms, the root of these symptoms, the impact of social misery on our most vulnerable people. And from there, we can derive this proper strategy to solve these problems. Because you can have your reform, but if you don't find out the root cause of these problems or these symptoms, these issues, it can be continue perpetuating. So that in a nutshell, is the area. I think if we can strengthen and support our families with appropriate and practical programs and policy, we can address the 3 areas of concern that I see this task force is trying to deal with in terms of our youth, children, and family, mental health and wellness, which is crucial because we all went through traumatic experience, whether it's the hurricane and now this COVID, and that needs to be addressed. Another concern, social justice, food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare and culture, to make sure that everyone, our children, our youths, our families are able to enjoy that right, and be able to get access to those social needs. And another concern I see, according to the article that I read and so forth, labor rights, make sure that our youngsters can get employment, or open their own businesses, or earn a living livelihood in which they can support themselves and their family. So to me, we got to look at, beside the legal wing of trying to enforce and make sure catch those who perpetrate and protect those who victim. Let us try and use some strategies that go with the whole Caribbean saying, ounce of prevention that is better than a pound of cure. And if we put some in place, program that teach our youngsters, in particular, and our community in general, the history and culture. A culture, not like Miss Sonia was saying, a culture that we know is that define us and dignify us as a people. We can solve a lot of these problems that we are facing, but we have to change our value. We have to change our philosophy. We have to change the type of behavior and attitude that we exhibit in today. Come together as a people, as a society. Many of these problems is a societal problem, whether it's human trafficking, healthcare, education, crime, the crime situation that we face. Collectively, if we become our brothers and sisters keeper, we can solve a lot of these things that is affecting us today. And that human trafficking and these other type of social injustice can be a thing of the past. But we have to be knowledgeable of our history and culture to be able to know this is the culture. The other influence negatively that come from elsewhere, we must eradicate and promote that of the positive. And that's my since time is very short for me because of the thing. That is my contribution to this conference, that we have to have short-term goal, but also long-term goal. And we have to fundamentally change any social, political, and economic structures and systems that do not elevate us as a people. That's a long-term goal that we have to fit. But in the meantime, we can do short-term goal, public awareness, using corporate media, training session or workshop and conferences like this. But this information that I enjoy listening to from different angles, this still will have to be shared with the community in general, Definitely. Asante sana for you all to listening, and I hope in my humble contribution, I think we need to look within and then we can reflect outward to bring about some fundamental change in the society.
Okay.
And Dr. Fred, thank you again for the opportunity, and in a brief short time, that is my humble contribution. Culture and history is one of the key to solving our problem here in the Virgin Islands.
Okay, I thank you.
Mr. Olimi, thank you.
I thank you very much. You were like icing on the cake for Sonia Dow's presentation, icing on the cake. So you're correct. Both of you talked about the importance of history, knowing thyself, knowing what you value, what your people value, What has been learned? That's a question. What values have we embraced upon that's not our values that we have incorporated into what we do that impacts how we reflect culture? Sonia talks a little bit about the carnival. Yes, she's correct. It has changed because when I was a little kid, my mother was sewing for the gypsies and there was the uniforms had a certain kind of look and they had to meet standards. So when we as a people move away from what's standard and we go along to get along, this what happens is a breakdown of the moral structure. And Sonia's correct. We need to involve our youths in conversations. Kaiser Cowboy, who's part of the task force, talks about it all the time. Before the pandemic, going to where children were to hear from them what's going on, how they're managing the hurricane, how they're managing life. And so we have to step back to go forward. And I want to thank you for sharing. Any feedback from Mr. Liba Oli before I wrap up? Oh. Any feedback for him, because I'm going to wrap up now because I know it's almost 1 o'clock. I have some short. Dr. Mika, for any comments before I close out, you and Dr. McGrath, because I'm about to close out. It's almost 1 o'clock. Don't shake your head and hold on to your doll in the back.
Sorry, I had to drag Dr. McGrath on the screen. This is our IT tech for the day. Okay, well, we want to thank all our presenters. Attorney Perry, Agent Thomas. We've got Sonia Jacob Dow from the St. Croix Landmark Society and Mr. Liba Oleni for our cultural aspect. Yes, we had to condense it this year. I mean, to our presenters, Agent Thomas, he was doing work. That's why he couldn't. He was actually doing work. So I'm totally grateful that he stopped working. And our 2 other presenters, it had IT issues that they couldn't connect with us. But CYTF family, we wrapped it up for this year. Human Trafficking Conference for this year. We're so happy that you guys are involved. So I'm really going back to Dr. Victor to wrap up and give her a card for the day. Thank you guys.
Well,
so let's wrap up.
I want to tell everyone, I'm thanking Dr. Hall, President Hall, who took the time to open up our remarks. The task force members who did a great job in the first hour talking about where they are and why they're committed. They have moved from the Virgin Islands, but they continue to be committed to children and families everywhere. So I want to thank all the members of the task force who came and their friends who participated. Commissioners who showed up, Commissioner White on a plane upset, Commissioner Gomez who took the moment to give remarks, and the other commissioners who participated, the other commissioners who could not be there, the team members were participating. But I want to share what's in reflection with Sonia and Liba Oleni. There's virtues that they all talked about throughout the whole conference. Being mindful, that's something that Director Winnie Testamar, Director of Biocorrections, thank you so much for allowing me to continue to do this kind of work and your leadership of your correction. She always uses this card. This is a word she uses, being mindful. That's her biggest virtue. Being mindful is living reflectively with consciousness, awareness of your actions, words, and thoughts. We are attentive to others' needs. We refuse to rush. We live mindfully with our lives in helping us to detach from our emotions. We cultivate an inner vision, awareness of life's lessons as they unfold. Mindfulness is serenity. Next card, justice. Timothy Perry did a great job talking about justice, and justice is being fair in all we do. We continuously look for truth by bowing down to other judgments or perceptions. We do not backbite. We clear our problems face by face. We continue to commit a wrong, we honest in correcting it and making amends if need be. If someone is hurting us, it is just to stop them. It's never just for strong people to hurt weaker people. With justice, we protect everyone's rights. Sometimes when we stand for justice, we stand alone. Reverence. That's Sonia Grau and Liba Oleni. Reverencing our history. And we must reverence our history to know where we're going. Reverence is living with awareness that we are ourselves the presence of the Creator and our history and life is precious. We take time in solitude and silence each day to contemplate, to pray and reflect. We seek to discern the deeper meaning of our lives. The beauty of nature restores us, so we are respectful towards the earth and we treasure life. Now, Sonia, and creativity is the power of imagination. We are open to inspiration, which ignites our originality. We are original in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We are a melting pot, and that should be standing out. As Sonia Dow said, we should be the Caribbean island that sets the example, not the other way around. Discovering our special talents is a gift of the world. Creativity connects us. Beauty of sound, design, color, and movement. It brings our gifts to fruition. The task force stands for service, using all our gifts to the service of all. Every day we defend the ways to be useful. We notice what others need, discover their wishes, and respond to them helpfully. We don't wait to be asked. A spirit of service invests whatever we do with excellence. The Children Task Force continues to move forward in a time where we have our own individual challenges and professional challenges. Thank them all. We give our very best effort. People who want to be of service can change the world. And Lee Bolini and Ms. Sonia Dow shared about the history, and do not let people write history that's not true to who we are. Humanity. Humanity is the attitude of caring and merciful towards others. We all breathe the same air. We cherish our children's future. We all suffer and rejoice. We lose our humanity whenever we generalize about a group of people and separate ourselves from them because of external characteristics of race and sex. Our humanity grows as we serve others. There is no day, it's only us. Last virtue, the virtue of unity. Unity is a power virtue and it brings great strength. We are inclusive. It brings others together. We see our community and not devaluing anyone. Unity frees us from prejudice and heals our fears. We refuse to engage in conflict, gossip. We seek for peace in circumstances. Unity comes when we value every person, every family, and our world. A joy of our joy, the hurt of one is the hurt of all. The honor of one is the honor of all. That is the mantra of the Children Task Force. I want to thank you all again. Wishing everyone a wonderful weekend. See you guys in 2 weeks, and God bless.
Bye, CYTF family. Next year, Human Trafficking Conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful job.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Liba. I need somebody's phone. Lucia Brown, I see you. Lottie, I see Lucia.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you, mental health.
Mental health team is in the house.
Thank you, mental health. Thanks.
DHS is in the house.
Okay, thank you. It's great.
Corrections in the house. Who's that? Brady.
That's Brady.
Okay,
How you doing, Dr. Victor?
Get yourself together, guy.
All right, it was great.
Thank you again for everyone. Your correction was in the house. Kaiser Coward, I know you're somewhere hiding. See you later.
Okay.
Thank you, Family Resource Center.
Thank you for the information, a beautiful training.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petey Simon. Thank you.
Thank you for all coming. See you guys soon again. Dr. McGrath, God bless you. Thank you so much for being super in IT. Super.
Yay, we love Dr. McGrath. We love her.
You need to coach me to be IT, okay? I have a long ways, girl. Maybe 2
service. It's the service.
Family Resource Center. We love you, girl.
Thank you.
Keep doing fabulous. I got my shirt. Don't even play. I got my shirt. Don't even play.
Great. Okay, bye. Be safe. Take care.
Be safe.
Everybody who was in a car on this conference, we thank you too.
Just be careful.
Thank
I heard
you.
that I know you're home. Go wake up now.
Thank you, Dr. Dotton. She gets her home. Thank you.
I know you're off.
I'm doing laundry.
You know what? When we're back on ground and in person,
please shut down the recording, please. Shut Shut down recording. Shut down. Shut down.